If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 61, Winky. Arthur slipped away from the chaos at the Quidditch pitch, leaving behind the Ministry officials clustered around a traumatized Harry Potter. While Voldemort's return threw the wizarding world into turmoil, Arthur had other priorities. He descended the stone steps to the basement, passing several portraits that whispered urgently to each other in his wake. Instead of turning toward the Slytherin dormitories, he headed for a large painting of a bowl of fruit. With practiced ease, Arthur reached up and tickled the pear. It giggled softly before transforming into a doorknob. The Hogwarts kitchen enveloped him in warmth and delicious aromas. 4 long tables, mirrors of those in the great hall above, dominated the space. House elves scurried among enormous copper pots and roaring ovens, their organized chaos a stark contrast to the pandemonium upstairs. A small elf with bat-like ears spotted him and hurried over, wiping flour-covered hands on a pristine tea towel. Master Hayes. The head kitchen elf executed a perfect bow. What brings you to kitchens tonight? Tournament is over, yes? Did Master Hayes win? No, Nippy, Arthur replied with a wry smile. Victory wasn't in the cards tonight. There've been complications. Nippy tilted his head curiously, but didn't press for details. Would Master Hayes like something to eat? We have shepherd's pie left from dinner. Or perhaps treacle tart. Just finished baking. Arthur had frequented the kitchens during his years at Hogwarts, sometimes for midnight snacks, other times to avoid everyone when he was in no mood to handle their looks or judgments. The elves always welcomed him with the same enthusiastic hospitality. Not hungry tonight? Arthur glanced around the bustling kitchen. I'm looking for Winky. Is she here? Yes, sir. Nippy wrung his hands. We tries to help, but she refuses. Says she is disgraced elf. Nothing we say makes difference. Could you take me to her? Nippy hesitated, ears drooping slightly. Master Hayes sure he wants to see? Winky not in good state for visitors. I'm sure. Very well. Follow Nippy, please. The head elf led Arthur through the bustling kitchen, past elves polishing silverware and preparing tomorrow's breakfast. In a far corner, near a small fireplace, 2 figures sat partially hidden behind a stack of cauldrons. Dobby, wearing what appeared to be a child's soccer uniform with mismatched socks, was attempting to wrest a bottle from the grip of a second elf. Winky looked terrible, her pillowcase uniform stained and grimy, her large eyes bloodshot. Winky must not drink more. Dobby pleaded. Dobby is telling Winky this is not good for elveses. Leave Winky alone. She slurred, clutching the butterbeer possessively. Winky is disgraced elf. Winky deserves nothing better. Arthur had observed this same scene during previous kitchen visits throughout the year but had never interfered. The time had not been right. Winky, Nippy announced, a wizard is wanting to speak with you. The female elf looked up, swaying slightly. Who wants to talk with worthless Winky? I do, Arthur said, stepping forward. What does wizard want with Winky? Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. Winky knows you. Winky sees you before, coming for midnight snacks. Arthur crouched down to her eye level, his voice matter of fact. I want you to be my house elf. The butterbeer bottle slipped from Winky's fingers, clattering on the stone floor. Dobby froze mid-reach, his tennis ball-sized eyes widening further. You, wants Winky? Her large eyes filled with confusion. But Winky is bad elf. Winky failed her masters. Winky cannot. You haven't failed anyone, Arthur interrupted. I know your situation, Winky. You did your best. No. She began hitting herself on the head. Winky cannot be proper elf anymore. Winky let Master Barty escape. Let him do bad things. She struck herself harder. Winky is bad again. She told Master's secret to Wizard. Winky is disgrace. Stop that. Arthur caught her tiny wrist. What happened with the Crouches doesn't matter anymore. Have you heard what happened at the school tonight? The kitchen quieted as nearby elves paused their work, ears perking up. Even in their isolated domain, they'd sensed something amiss. What is happening, sir? Nippy asked, wringing his tea towel anxiously. A lot. Arthur released Winky's wrist. Professor Moody wasn't really moody at all. He was an imposter using Polyjuice Potion, interfering with the Triwizard Tournament to send Harry Potter to Voldemort. The elves flinched collectively at the name. Is Harry Potter safe? Dobby jumped up, nearly knocking over a cauldron in his distress. He's returned alive, Arthur confirmed. But Voldemort is back. Dark days are coming for the wizarding world. A heavy silence settled over the kitchen. How does this matter to Winky? The female elf hiccuped again. It matters a great deal. Arthur leaned closer. The impostor Moody I fought and subdued him tonight. When I brought him back, his disguise wore off. Winky, it was Barty Crouch Jr. Winky's bloodshot eyes cleared instantly. Master Barty? At Hogwarts. She scrambled to her feet. Where is he? Winky must help. You can't, Arthur said quietly. Minister Fudge brought a Dementor to the school. It performed the kiss before anyone could intervene. Winky swayed dangerously. No, not the kiss. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto her stool. Worse than death. Poor Master Barty, soul gone forever. There's more, Arthur continued. During our battle, Barty confessed something. He said he killed his father weeks ago. This was a lie. Barty had made no such confession to Arthur, but there were no witnesses to contradict him. No. Winky's denial echoed through the kitchen. Master would never. He did, Arthur said firmly. Barty Crouch Sr. is dead. His son is worse than dead. The Crouch family is gone, Winky. The dam broke. Winky collapsed into hysterical sobs, her tiny body convulsing with grief. Arthur simply waited, allowing her to process the brutal finality of her former family's fate. Eventually, her wails subsided to hiccuping sobs. Why? She asked, looking up at Arthur with swollen eyes. Why would Wizard want Winky when Winky could not protect her masters? Arthur sat cross-legged on the floor beside her. I know you did your best. It wasn't your fault. He met her gaze directly. The truth is, I've always wanted a house elf, but now I need one more than ever. What happened, Hayes Wizard? Nippy asked, ears perked with curiosity. I had an adventure recently, Arthur explained, choosing his words carefully. As a result, I can't use my magic for some time. Life will be difficult without it, so I need someone I can trust to help me. Winky wiped her nose on her pillowcase. You want someone you can trust? Then Winky is bad choice. Winky cannot follow orders properly. Winky fails. I believe in you, Arthur said simply. You are a good elf, Winky. How many people's in Hayes' family? Winky asked suspiciously. Currently just me. But if you joined, you'd be the second member. Arthur's lips quirked upward. Hopefully we'll grow from there. Second member. Winky blinked in confusion. Family, Arthur clarified. Not servant. Family. The concept seemed to short-circuit something in Winky's understanding of the world. Being considered family rather than property was both alien and strangely touching to the small creature. Dobby bounced on his toes excitedly. Winky should accept. Master Hayes is good wizard. Harry Potter himself said so. High praise indeed, Arthur muttered dryly. But Winky failed. She began again. The past is past, Arthur interrupted firmly. Everyone makes mistakes. I've made plenty myself. That's how we learn and improve. Dobby turned to Winky, eyes earnest. Winky deserves good home. Good family. Better than butterbeer and crying. Dobby knelt beside Winky, his mismatched eyes earnest. Winky deserves good home. Good family. Better than butterbeer and crying. Nippy stepped forward as well. Wizard Hayes is good, Winky. All these years, he treats kitchen elves with respect. Never demands, always asks. He will treat you well. Winky looked between them, indecision etched in her features. Finally, she took a shuddering breath and straightened her shoulders. Winky will try, she said, her voice steadier than it had been all evening. Winky will be Hayes' elf. Dobby clapped his hands together. Wonderful. Dobby is so happy for Winky. Several kitchen elves nodded approvingly. Do you know the bonding ritual? Arthur asked. Winky straightened, dignity temporarily overcoming her disheveled state. Of course. All elves know bonding magic. Is first thing we learn. Arthur nodded and extended his hand. Then let's proceed. The kitchen grew quiet as Winky placed her tiny hand in Arthur's. House elves throughout the kitchen stopped to watch, sensing the significance of the moment. Arthur knew house elves didn't possess their own magic. They channeled it from their bonded wizards or magical dwellings. Arthur did not know why this was so. Maybe they were cursed by some powerful being many years ago. I, Arthur Hayes, accept Winky into my household and family, he stated formally. Winky accepts service to House of Hayes, the elf responded, her voice gaining strength with each word. A soft golden glow emanated from their joined hands, spreading to encompass Winky entirely. Arthur sighed with relief. His inability in using magic did not stop this. The golden glow was standard procedure, but then something changed that left everyone speechless. The golden glow intensified, interwoven with threads of deep blue and cosmic purple, the same colors Arthur had seen in his transformed magical core. Winky rose several inches off the ground, suspended in the cocoon of light. Her appearance began to change before their eyes. The alcoholic flush vanished from her cheeks. Her bloodshot eyes cleared. Her stooped posture straightened as new vitality flowed visibly into her small frame. But the transformation didn't stop there. Her features subtly shifted, not enough to make her unrecognizable as a house elf, but noticeable nonetheless. Her ears became less bat-like, her nose refined slightly, and her previously gaunt frame filled out with healthy muscle. When the light finally faded, Winky looked like a different elf, clean, alert, and somehow more defined, as if she'd stepped from a blurry photograph into sharp focus. Merlin's beard, Nippy whispered, breaking the stunned silence. Winky examined her hands in wonder. Winky feels strange. She snapped her fingers experimentally, and a nearby stack of plates floated effortlessly into a cupboard. Her eyes widened. Magic is stronger. Much stronger. She began testing her abilities, performing increasingly complex charms with obvious delight. Pots scrubbed themselves, ingredients sorted themselves, and a small orb of light hovered above her palm, shifting through rainbow colors. The other elves watched with expressions ranging from awe to obvious envy. What happened? Arthur murmured, more to himself than anyone else. Was this because of his strength or altered magical core? Would the same happen if Dumbledore bonded with an elf? Questions with no easy way to test, but since the outcome seemed beneficial, perhaps it wasn't worth worrying about. Dobby approached Arthur and bowed deeply. Dobby has never seen such bonding. Master Hayes must be very powerful wizard. Please take good care of Winky. I think Winky might be taking care of me, Arthur replied, watching as his new elf continued experimenting with her enhanced abilities. He beckoned Dobby to step aside with him. Dobby, have you thought about bonding with Harry Potter? The small elf's ears quivered. Harry Potter. His voice dropped to a reverent whisper. Dobby would be honored, but Harry Potter believes in freedom for elves. He would not want to own Dobby. Harry doesn't understand the wizarding world yet, Arthur explained. He doesn't realize that house elves need magical bonds to survive. That bonding does not mean slavery. It is symbiotic. Dobby twisted the hem of his mismatched shirt. This is true. You should explain it to him, Arthur suggested. Tell him how the bond works, and why elves need it. He might understand if you frame it properly. Perhaps. Dobby seemed uncertain. Think about his summers with his relatives, Arthur pressed. You've seen how they treat him, haven't you? Dobby's expression darkened. They are terrible to Harry Potter. Lock him up. Don't feed him properly. And if Harry had someone to bring him food? To watch over him? Something hardened in Dobby's eyes. Harry Potter will not go hungry again. Dobby will make sure. Just talk to him, Arthur advised. After the term ends, when he's facing another summer with the Dursleys. Dobby nodded decisively. Dobby will try. Arthur returned to Winky, who was now standing straighter than he'd ever seen her, a newfound dignity in her bearing. Winky, for now, you can stay in the kitchen, he said. Help if you wish. I'll call if I need you, and at term's end, we'll go to our new home. Yes, Master Hayes. She gave a small, dignified bow. Winky will be ready. And thank your friends here, Arthur added. They cared for you during a difficult time. Winky turned to the assembled elves and bowed deeply. Winky is grateful to everyone. Winky will help until Master calls. With a final nod to Nippy, Arthur headed for the exit. As the portrait swung shut behind him, he couldn't suppress a satisfied smile. House elves were notoriously difficult to acquire in the wizarding world. Arthur had been waiting for this opportunity for many years, and the timing couldn't have been better. Without his magic, the coming months would have been challenging indeed. Chapter 62, Farewells. Sunlight splashed across the hospital wing floor in golden rectangles. The room smelled of antiseptic potions and fresh linen, that particular blend unique to magical healing spaces. Harry sat propped against pillows, idly flipping through a dog-eared Quidditch magazine. Despite a day of recovery, shadows still lingered under his eyes. He looked up at the sound of approaching footsteps. Arthur. Harry straightened, setting aside the magazine. Didn't expect to see you here. Arthur pulled up a chair, its wooden legs scraping against stone. Thought I'd check on the Triwizard Champion before the adoring masses descend. That's not. Harry fidgeted with the edge of his blanket. You should have been holding that cup. Not me. Would have been nice, Arthur admitted with a half-smile. First competition I've lost at Hogwarts. 7 years of being first at everything, and I fumble at the finish line. You only lost because you were fighting a Death Eater, Harry protested. Everyone's talking about how you took down the fake Moody without magic. Are they now? Arthur leaned back, chair creaking slightly. Good to know my reputation will continue to terrify purebloods and Death Eaters for years to come. Harry smiled that it will. But you should at least keep the prize money. Keep it. Arthur waved dismissively. I have plenty. Besides, something tells me you'll need those galleons more than I do. Harry studied him, head tilted slightly. You really don't care about winning, do you? Glory evaporates like morning dew. Skills are forever. Arthur leaned forward, elbows on knees. Speaking of which, what exactly happened after you touched the cup? Harry hesitated. His fingers gripped the blanket tighter. I don't know. It doesn't feel real yet. 1 minute I was grabbing the cup, the next. His voice trailed off. Tell me what happened, Arthur said quietly. If you're comfortable. I know it can't be easy to revisit. For a moment, Harry seemed ready to refuse. Then something in Arthur's expression changed his mind. The cup took me to a graveyard, Harry began, voice dropping. Old place, overgrown. There was this massive cauldron, and Wormtail Peter Pettigrew was there. He was carrying something that looked like a deformed baby, but it wasn't. Arthur listened without interruption as Harry described the ritual: the bone from the grave, Wormtail cutting off his own hand, the blood taken from Harry's arm, and finally, Voldemort rising from the cauldron. The Death Eaters appeared almost immediately, Harry continued, each word emerging with visible effort. They formed a circle around him. He called them by name: Malfoy, Crabbe, Goyle, not others. Harry fell silent after describing his escape, the bizarre connection between the wands, the echoes of Voldemort's victims, his desperate dash to the cup. You did well to survive, Arthur said finally. Most wouldn't have. Harry shook his head. It was luck. The wands connecting Dumbledore called it Priori Incantatum. I didn't do anything special. Survival isn't about doing something special, Arthur countered. It's about using whatever advantage presents itself. Had you not maintained that connection long enough to reach the cup, you'd be dead. Yet. Harry looked up. Thanks for that hint about the cup. Did you know something was going to happen? I overthink things. Arthur shrugged. The only logical reason for someone to help you win was if something was wrong with the cup. Sorry I didn't stop you. With fake Moody there, you leaving was actually the safest option. I couldn't have fought him while protecting you. I don't blame you. Everything happened so fast. Harry shifted against his pillows. How did you beat Crouch without magic? The real Moody is supposed to be one of the best Aurors ever, and Crouch managed to overpower him. Magic isn't everything. Arthur tapped his temple. Reflexes, strategy, physical conditioning, they matter just as much in a fight. Is that how you beat Crouch? Dodging. Partly. He was also arrogant, emotional, and easily provoked. Arthur's eyes hardened momentarily. Fatal flaws in any fight. No one teaches that here. No, Arthur agreed. That's why you should add physical training to your magical studies. Running, strength exercises, defensive techniques. Even an hour daily would make a difference. Harry looked skeptical. Against Death Eaters? Against anyone? Arthur leaned closer. Being faster, stronger, and more aware of your surroundings isn't just for muggles. Magic is a tool, not a replacement for physical capability. I'll think about it, Harry said, clearly unconvinced. Arthur stood, preparing to leave, then paused. One more thing. Things won't be easy for you now. Because of Voldemort. Him and the Ministry both. Harry's brow furrowed. What's the Ministry got to do with it? Look at it from Fudge's perspective, Arthur said, lowering his voice. Admitting Voldemort has returned would cause panic and likely end his career. Why would he risk that? Because it's true. Harry's voice rose before he caught himself. Fudge was right here. He heard everything I told Dumbledore. And he made sure Crouch got kissed before he could confirm your story. Arthur raised an eyebrow. Convenient, wouldn't you say? Harry's expression darkened. You think he did that deliberately? Fudge will do whatever it takes to maintain the status quo, Arthur replied. That includes discrediting anyone who threatens it, even the famous Harry Potter. They'll make me look like I'm lying. Harry's hands clenched the blanket. They'll paint you as unstable. Attention-seeking. Possibly delusional. Arthur's tone remained matter-of-fact. The Prophet will lead the charge. They take their editorial direction straight from the Ministry. Why are you telling me this? Because no one else will, at least not directly. Arthur shrugged. Dumbledore has too much on his plate with Voldemort's return. You'll be mostly on your own, and you should prepare for the worst. Harry sat silent for a long moment. I appreciate the warning, he said finally. Even if I hope you're wrong. So do I. Arthur moved toward the door. Oh, and don't be surprised if Dobby approaches you this summer. He might have a proposition for you. Before Harry could ask what he meant, Arthur was gone. The final week of term unfolded exactly as Arthur had predicted. Skepticism spread through the student body like spilled ink. Attention-seeking, whispered a Ravenclaw in the library. Probably just wanted more fame, came a Hufflepuff's response. Potter's gone round the bend, suggested a group of Slytherins. Many found it easier to dismiss Harry's claims as delusion than believe the feared Dark Lord had somehow returned. Thankfully, with no Cedric Diggory dying in this world, he was spared the accusation of being a murderer. And the absence of a student death meant the castle retained its colourful banners rather than being draped in mourning black. The mood might be subdued, but the visual reminder of loss was mercifully absent. The Durmstrang ship departed 3 days before term's end, sinking gracefully into the lake's depths. Karkaroff was conspicuously missing, undoubtedly having fled the moment his dark mark burned. The Beauxbatons carriage followed the next day, its massive winged horses thundering into the clouds. On his last evening at Hogwarts, Arthur stood at the edge of the lake, watching the giant squid lazily wave its tentacles in the fading light. 7 years, he murmured to the creature. Not all of it pleasant, but educational nonetheless. The squid slapped the water's surface, sending ripples toward the shore. Yes, I'll miss our conversations too. Arthur smiled faintly. Though I suspect they were rather one-sided. He turned to face the castle, its windows glowing warmly against the twilight sky. For all its flaws and the prejudice he'd endured within its walls, Hogwarts had given him knowledge, sanctuary, and a foundation for his future plans. The professors, at least some of them, had been fair. The elves had shown him kindness. Even in isolation, he'd found ways to thrive. Farewell, Hogwarts, Arthur whispered. May your future students find more acceptance than I did. July 3rd arrived with unexpected sunshine. Golden light bathed Hogsmeade Station as students boarded the Hogwarts Express for the final journey of the year. Arthur claimed an empty compartment. No tearful goodbyes or promises to write awaited him. Just the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. When the train finally reached King's Cross, he disembarked calmly. Families reunited around him, embraces, laughter, trunks scraping against the platform. Arthur moved through the crowd unnoticed. 7 years had yielded knowledge and power, but few connections. It seemed fitting that he should leave as he had arrived alone. He paused before the barrier to the Muggle world, taking one final look at the scarlet engine that had carried him between two lives for so long. Somewhere in the crowd, Harry stood with his friends, unaware of how the coming months would test him. Elsewhere, Dumbledore marshalled his forces for a war most refused to acknowledge. Their paths were set. Now Arthur would forge his own. With a deep breath, he stepped through the brick wall, leaving the wizarding world behind for what may surely be the final time. Chapter 63, New Beginnings. The Muggle side of King's Cross bustled with Monday afternoon energy. Commuters rushed past with briefcases, tourists fumbled with maps, and children darted between harried parents. Arthur had taken 3 steps away from the brick barrier when a familiar voice cut through the noise. Arthur! Arthur! Over here! He turned to see Aurora Thatcher weaving through the crowd. Her crisp navy pantsuit and authoritative stride marked her immediately as government MI6 specifically, though ordinary passers-by wouldn't recognize the subtle signs. "Didn't expect to see you here," Arthur said flatly as she reached him. "How did you even know I'd be here? I could have operated directly from the platform and you'd have missed me entirely. I heard about your injury." Aurora lowered her voice, glancing around to ensure privacy. "Magical core damage. Figured you'd use the normal exit." Arthur's jaw tightened. "News travels fast. I've been in contact with Amelia Bones. She told me everything." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Why didn't you tell me about something this serious?" "Why? So MI6 could update my file." Aurora's professional mask slipped, revealing genuine concern. "Because I've been your guardian for 7 years, Arthur. Magic or not. Just a government-appointed guardian. Nothing special. Still the same charming personality, I see." She gestured toward the exit. "Need a ride?" Arthur considered declining purely out of spite, but remembered he needed to ask her something. "Fine." They walked in uncomfortable silence through the station and out to a sleek black Audi parked in a restricted zone. Government plates explained the prime parking spot. "So," Aurora said once they were moving through London traffic, "what happened?" "Magical accident." Arthur watched buildings pass outside the window. "It'll heal eventually." "That's not what Bones said. Would I be in such a jolly mood if my magic was gone for good?" "No. That answers your question." Aurora took a sharp turn, cutting off a taxi. 7 years, and you still can't manage a normal conversation. You know the reason. Yet. Aurora's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "But you know I couldn't do anything. My superiors stopped me from continuing the investigations." "And you listened," Arthur replied coldly. "That will always be a barrier between us. Can't you forget it? It would be dangerous. I suspect powerful people are involved." "Never. I will have my vengeance." "Okay, let's not ruin the mood anymore." She navigated around a double-parked delivery truck. "So what's the plan now?" "Still America. Nothing's changed. Except your magic. A temporary setback." Aurora shot him a sideways glance. "And Voldemort's return? Not a factor in your calculations." Arthur stiffened. "How do you know about that?" "We have our sources. Apparently better ones than most wizards." Arthur's tone sharpened. "The Ministry's already in denial mode. And you're still leaving? Even knowing what's coming. The wizarding world created him. They can deal with him. That's cold, even for you." "It's practical." Arthur watched a family laughing outside a cafe. One dark wizard against an entire magical community who technically have the means to defend themselves. If they can't overcome their fear, they deserve what happens. Aurora fell silent. Arthur seized the opportunity to redirect the conversation. "Why are you worried about Voldemort? It shouldn't matter much to you, right? The wizarding community will handle it when it becomes too much. Not like you can do anything about it anyway. So you know about the Covenant?" "Yes." Arthur's lips quirked into a cold smile. "Funny how someone wanted to recruit me for MI6 when, according to the rules, it's forbidden." Aurora took another sharp turn. "It's forbidden, but there are loopholes. We can't train you or use you against the wizarding world, but there are other areas where we need people with your perspective." "Well, since you haven't asked me to join again, I guess the offer is off the table." Arthur's voice remained neutral. "Your boss knows about my injury?" "Yes." Arthur muttered. "And you wonder why I don't share my secrets with you? What do you plan to do in America?" Aurora asked, acting as if she had not heard Arthur's muttering. "You know the Covenant limits your options. I'll find loopholes, same as you." Arthur straightened. "Speaking of which, I need your help." "What?" "I want to take A-levels without waiting until next year. Can your agency get me a certificate?" Aurora nearly missed a turn. "No. I won't break rules like that. Besides, you're injured, take some time to rest. You've worked too hard and need recovery. You'll also need time to study the course materials. Plan B then. Was worth a try." Arthur shrugged. "I'll just use magic to bypass the requirement." "What?" "Charm a blank paper so everyone sees it as my certificate. I'm not wasting time on some exam. You'd be breaking the statute of secrecy, Aurora hissed. And how would you even manage it when you can't use magic? I have a friend who'll help. It's not breaking any statute if I don't get caught. Aurora's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as she tried to dissuade him. Arthur remained unmoved, just as stubborn as he'd been in September when refusing her job offer. Finally, she sighed in defeat. I'll help you arrange a private examination, she conceded. You'll need to pass it yourself, no magical cheating. Fine by me. And you'll owe me a favor. Whatever. The conversation shifted to less contentious topics as they drove. London's streets narrowed as they entered Belgravia, where Arthur's townhouse stood among elegant neighbours. Here we are, she said, putting the car in park. Home sweet home. Arthur opened his door. Thanks for the ride. Want to come in? She shook her head. I'm not falling for that. With your current condition, I'd end up doing all the cleaning and setup. Your place has probably gathered dust for months. Arthur had meant no such thing, but merely shrugged. Suit yourself. I'll call about those A-levels, Aurora said as he stepped out. I'll try to arrange it as soon as possible. Appreciated. Arthur watched her car disappear around the corner before approaching his front door. The wards he'd placed around the house just last year recognized him immediately, the door unlocking at his touch. In his study, Arthur stood before a portrait of his parents. They smiled down at him, ordinary painted figures, not magical portraits that moved and spoke. I'm back, he said simply. After confirming the house's security, Arthur moved to the center of the entrance hall. Winky, he called softly. A sharp crack split the silence. Where empty space had been a moment before, his house elf now stood. Master Hayes. Winky beamed, her transformed appearance still startling. Winky has been waiting for your call. Welcome to our London home, Arthur said, indicating the elegant surroundings. This is one of my houses. Winky looked around with wide, appreciative eyes. Beautiful home. No dust even after months away. Preservation charms, Arthur explained, heading toward his study. Placed when I turned of age last year. Arthur then looked into Winky's eyes and, using legilimency, shared a memory with her. The image of a manor outside London unfolded in her mind. There were no issues with using mind magic in his current state. This is Hayes Manor, he explained as the elf absorbed the information. My other home. Can you take us there? Winky closed her eyes briefly, processing the new knowledge. When she opened them, determination shone in her gaze. Yes, Master Hayes. Winky can do it. She extended her small hand. Arthur took it, and with a crack louder than any wizard's apparition, they vanished from the townhouse. They materialized in a grand entrance hall with marble floors and a sweeping staircase. Excellent, Arthur said, orienting himself in the space. Now for our primary objective. Last night, I showed you an item in Hogwarts, a large wooden cabinet with carved symbols. Vanishing cabinet. Winky nodded eagerly. Winky remembers. Can you retrieve it and bring it here? Winky squared her shoulders. Winky will do it. She disappeared with another crack. Arthur had barely begun examining the room's magical defenses when a thunderous sound announced her return. The massive cabinet materialized beside her, its dark wood gleaming with ancient power. Arthur approached it with carefully concealed excitement. Impressive work, Winky. Most fully qualified wizards couldn't transport something this size. Winky is strong now, she replied, a note of pride in her voice. Indeed. Arthur ran his fingers along the cabinet's surface, feeling the magic pulse beneath them. Let's move this to the basement where it will be secure. With another crack, they and the cabinet relocated to the manor's extensive cellar. Arthur positioned it against the far wall, away from potential interference. Now we go to another house of mine, he said, pulling open the heavy door. Arthur stepped inside, gesturing for Winky to follow. The door closed behind them, plunging them into momentary darkness. When light returned, they stood in another basement. Walking out of there, Winky got her first glimpse of Arthur's Beverly Hills mansion. Winky gasped, her eyes widening to almost comical proportions. We are in another country. Yes, Arthur confirmed, 3,000 miles from Britain in an instant. The house elf approached the windows cautiously, mesmerized by the sprawling city below. This is where Master Hayes will live now. Maybe. Maybe not. Consider this a hideout, Arthur replied. LA wasn't really that important in the grand scheme of things. To witness all the significant events, he needed to be in New York. He'd have to buy another house there eventually. But there was no hurry, it wasn't the right time to cash in his investments for another property. An opportunity would come in a few years. He would wait until then. Chapter 64, Unexpected Doors. 3 days after returning to London, Arthur's phone rang. The landline in his house worked perfectly fine. The whole electronics failing around magic issue only affected magic-saturated areas like Hogwarts. His home, with just a few simple wards, posed no problem for telephone signals. "It's arranged," Aurora's voice announced when he answered. "Next Tuesday, 9 a.m. A private examination center in Westminster." Arthur leaned back in his chair. That was quick. Given the reputation of government institutions, I was expecting a wait of at least a month. Apparently a wizard owing MI6 a favor is worth cutting through red tape. Her voice carried that particular blend of professionalism and skepticism he'd come to recognize. "Though I fail to see how you'll be useful in your current condition. My brain works perfectly fine." Arthur traced a finger along the edge of his desk. "And the injury is temporary. The exam will be strictly monitored," Aurora warned. "Any sign of cheating and you'll fail on the spot. If I were you, I'd start studying now." Arthur laughed. "I don't need magic for A-levels. You should know I could have passed them when I was 10. He tapped his fingers against the desk. "Your investigation file must have details on my grade skipping and academic performance. That was 8 years ago. You still remember all that material?" "I certainly don't recall what I studied in school. That's why I'm the genius." "Narcissist," Aurora shot back. Papers rustled in the background. "A car will collect you at 8. Don't be late." The line went dead before he could deliver a retort. Typical Aurora, always needing the last word. With the examination scheduled, Arthur turned his attention to preparation. He retrieved the Ravenclaw diadem from its hidden compartment in his trunk. The tiara remained in its original form. He hadn't found time to modify it with everything that had happened at Hogwarts. Arthur briefly recalled the 3 rare magical books he'd been forced to return to Dumbledore, part of his bargain for participating in the Triwizard Tournament. The headmaster had insisted on reclaiming all 3 volumes, even though Karkaroff hadn't stuck around to collect his contribution, claiming the dark magic they contained was too dangerous for Arthur. "As if I hadn't already memorized every useful page," Arthur muttered to the empty room. He placed the diadem carefully on his head. The effect was immediate, a cooling sensation across his temples followed by crystalline clarity. His thoughts, always organized, now aligned with supernatural precision. Perfect for reviewing 5 A-level subjects in a matter of days. For the next week, Arthur divided his days between academic review and attempts to strengthen his magical pathways. The latter remained frustratingly slow. No visible progress to show his method was working. His chosen A-level subjects formed a strategic selection: mathematics, physics, chemistry, further mathematics, and computer science. The foundation for his technological ambitions. Much of the material he already knew, either from his previous life or from his parallel studies during Hogwarts years. Since he already had plans to learn about the advanced tech in MCU, he had maintained his interest in Muggle technology, regularly reading relevant books when magical studies became tedious. While he could have used magic to simply bypass the entire university admission process, that would have created suspicion in his academic record. Such inconsistencies might flag him for monitoring by organizations like S.H.I.E.L.D., since Arthur was sure universities were completely monitored by government agencies and villain organizations to find bright minds for their use. No, better to build his credentials properly. Besides, MIT would demand actual knowledge, not just the appearance of it. Why did he choose MIT? If the institution had been good enough for Tony Stark, it would serve Arthur's purposes nicely. Tuesday arrived with rare London sunshine. The government car, black, unmarked, and unmistakably official, pulled up precisely at 8 o'clock. The driver held himself with military bearing despite his civilian clothes. "Mr. Hayes," he nodded, opening the rear door without further conversation. The testing facility occupied 3 floors of an unremarkable building near Westminster. After passing through multiple security checkpoints, Arthur was escorted to a sparsely furnished room where his examiner awaited. She rose from behind a massive desk, extending a firm hand. Tall and imperious, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a severe bun, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never been successfully deceived. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her grip surprisingly strong. "I understand you'll be attempting all 5 examinations today." "Yes," Arthur replied simply. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Most candidates require months of preparation for each subject. I'm not most candidates. Evidently not. She gestured to an adjoining room visible through an observation window. You have 6 hours. I'll be watching. The examinations themselves proved almost boring, challenging for an ordinary student, perhaps, but routine with his enhanced cognition. By late afternoon, he had completed all 5 subjects. The examiner collected his final papers, leafing through them with clinical precision. Impressive timing, Mr. Hayes. 5 A-levels in 6 hours. I've always been efficient. So I see. She tapped the papers against the desk. Results will be available in August alongside the standard releases. Thank you for the accommodation. Her gaze sharpened. Your government connections must run quite deep. Arthur offered a measured smile. They're investing in potential. With the A-levels behind him and months before SAT examinations and university applications, Arthur found himself with something unfamiliar: free time. His daily routine included exercises to strengthen his magical pathways and some physical training. But these consumed only a few hours. The remainder stretched empty before him, a blank canvas he hadn't faced since childhood. The London townhouse, despite its elegance, became stifling. Only Winky's cheerful presence and Mercury's occasional hooting broke the silence. And while the house elf's cheerful efficiency was appreciated, conversation remained limited. One morning over breakfast, Winky placed a perfectly arranged plate before him, then fixed him with an unexpectedly direct stare. Master Hayes should go outside more, she declared, hands on her tiny hips. Being always inside makes wizards pale and grumpy. Arthur lowered his newspaper. I've lived in London my entire life. There's nothing new to see. Living somewhere isn't same as seeing it, Winky insisted. Always studying, training, working. Never exploring the world for all its joys. He considered objecting, then realized she was right. Since his parents' murders, he'd rarely ventured out except with specific purpose. The city beyond his windows might as well have been theoretical. Perhaps you have a point, Winky. Thanks, he conceded. Winky beamed. Winky is happy to help Master Hayes. London in 1995 existed in an interesting technological transition. The internet was emerging but remained primitive. Most people still relied on physical maps and pay phones. Smartphones were years away, and cash was king. Architecture blended centuries of history with post-war brutalism and emerging glass and steel modernism. Arthur walked for hours each day, rediscovering a city he'd technically never left. Westminster Abbey's soaring arches echoed with whispered prayers and shuffling tourists. The British Museum's endless galleries displayed treasures gathered, or plundered, depending on perspective, from every corner of the empire. The collection's vastness occupied many days of Arthur's wanderings. On his 5th day of exploration, something extraordinary tingled at the edges of his awareness. An energy signature unlike anything in the wizarding world, ancient, profound, and distinctly non-human. His altered magic had dramatically expanded his magical perception. Energies that would have been invisible now registered clearly. Arthur followed the sensation carefully, maintaining his distance. It led him to an elegant woman examining a shop window display. To ordinary observers, she appeared perfectly normal, just another Londoner going about her day. But Arthur knew better. Circe, he said silently in his mind, recognizing the Eternal immediately. He considered approaching her but couldn't predict her reaction. His knowledge from his previous life might not perfectly align with this reality's characters. What if she perceived him as a threat? In his current weakened state, he would be hopelessly outmatched. Better to wait. The events involving the Eternals lay years ahead. There would be time enough to meet them when he could do so from a position of strength. Arthur retreated quietly, filing the encounter away for future reference. 2 days later, he was exploring an unfamiliar neighborhood when something else tickled his enhanced senses. This energy felt different, not cosmic vitality but something structured, almost mathematical in its precision. Following the mystical pulse led him to an imposing building with a distinctive circular window near its peak. The address plate read 177A Bleecker Street. Arthur stopped cold, recognition flooding through him. The London Sanctum Sanctorum, one of 3 primary bases used by the masters of the mystic arts to protect Earth from mystical threats. He stood across the street, calculating his options. The Ancient One and her disciples represented both opportunity and risk. Unlike Circe, whom he had no immediate reason to contact, the sorcerers of Kamarage practiced a form of magic that genuinely interested him. But would they welcome him or perceive him as a threat, a disruptor to the natural flow of the universe? They haven't moved against me yet, Arthur reasoned quietly. That suggests either acceptance or ignorance. As he debated his next move, the sanctum's massive wooden door creaked open slightly, just enough to be unmistakably deliberate. No person appeared in the gap, yet the invitation seemed clear. Well, Arthur murmured, that's certainly direct. Every instinct warned caution. In his current state, with magic barely functional, he would be at a severe disadvantage if this proved hostile. Yet opportunity rarely arrived without risk. Arthur crossed the street and paused at the threshold. Finally, with a deep breath, he stepped through the doorway into the shadowed interior. The massive door swung closed behind him with a resonant thud that seemed to echo between dimensions. Chapter 65, The Ancient One. The massive door swung shut behind Arthur with a resonant thud that seemed to echo between dimensions. For a heartbeat, darkness enveloped him completely. Then his eyes adjusted. He stood in a vast entrance hall that smelled of sandalwood and old paper. Ancient artifacts gleamed in glass cases along the walls, each radiating distinctive energies that tickled his enhanced magical perception. Grand staircases swept upward on either side, their wooden railings polished by centuries of hands. The London Sanctum felt eerily still compared to the magical buildings he was accustomed to. No moving portraits, no floating candles, no ghosts drifting through walls. Just silence and watchful shadows. Arthur's footsteps echoed against marble as he ventured further inside. A floorboard creaked somewhere above, drawing his attention upward. Arthur Hayes, a voice called from the top of the staircase. A tall man in blue robes descended with measured steps. His face bore the weathered look of someone who had seen far more than most, yet his movements remained fluid and precise. Yes, Arthur confirmed, hand instinctively hovering near his useless wand. I am Master Chen, guardian of the London Sanctum. The man's voice carried a faint accent Arthur couldn't quite place. The Ancient One is expecting you. Arthur's eyebrow rose slightly. Is she now? She has been for some time. Master Chen gestured toward the staircase. This way. One doesn't keep the Sorcerer Supreme waiting. Arthur followed him up the curved stairs, past display cases containing objects that radiated power unlike anything in the wizarding world and would have sent most wizards into scholarly frenzies. At the top floor, they approached an ornate door carved with interlocking circles and spirals that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. Through here, Chen said, pushing the door open. She awaits within. Arthur entered a circular chamber unlike anything in the wizarding world. 3 massive doorways stood at equal distances around the perimeter, each framed by distinctive architectural elements representing their locations. The air here felt charged, as if currents of invisible energy flowed between the portals. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Master Chen had not followed. Arthur stood alone in the chamber, examining the doorways with interest. One clearly led to New York, another to Hong Kong based on their designs. The third, directly across from him, must return to London. You are late, Wizard Hayes. Arthur turned toward the gentle voice. In the center of the room stood a slender woman in yellow robes, her head completely bald, her ageless face serene despite the sharp intelligence in her eyes. The Ancient One. Without hesitation, Arthur gave her a respectful half-bow, a gesture he'd shown to almost no one else in this world. Sorcerer Supreme, he acknowledged, straightening. Unlike his interactions with Dumbledore, Fury, or other authority figures, Arthur felt no urge toward his usual detached insolence. This woman had safeguarded reality itself for centuries, making choices and sacrifices few could comprehend. If anyone deserved respect, it was her. No need for formalities, she said, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. Though I must say, I did not expect this reaction from you. I'm merely showing respect to the Sorcerer Supreme who has protected this reality from threats most people couldn't begin to comprehend, Arthur replied. She studied him with eyes that seemed to see far more than his physical presence. You know a great deal, Mr. Hayes, perhaps more than you should. A small smile played at her lips. But this isn't the place for such conversation. Please, follow me. With elegant precision, she traced her fingers through empty air. Golden sparks followed her movements, forming a perfect circle that expanded into a portal. Through it, Arthur glimpsed a simple room with wooden floors and paper screens. Without looking back to see if he followed, the Ancient One stepped through the portal. After a moment's hesitation, Arthur did the same. The portal closed behind them with a sound like a sigh. They stood in a tranquil space that felt worlds away from London's urban energy. Low cushions surrounded a simple wooden table where a teapot already steamed. Sunlight filtered through rice paper screens, and the air carried the faint scent of jasmine and mountain herbs. "Please," she gestured to a cushion, "sit." Arthur settled across from her, watching as she poured tea with practiced grace. "You were expecting me," he said. "Not a question." "Yes." She handed him a ceramic cup, warm against his fingers. "I noticed your presence during the recent Kree incursion." Arthur's eyebrows rose slightly. "You were there?" "Observing." "I observe many things." She sipped her tea. "That's how I recognized your uniqueness." "If you were watching, why not intervene?" Arthur asked, the question that had nagged at him for weeks finally finding voice. Earth was nearly destroyed. "The Sorcerer Supreme's duty is to guard against mystical and interdimensional threats," she explained, her tone neither defensive nor apologetic. "Not alien invasions or conventional warfare." "Then whose responsibility is it to protect Earth from those threats?" "Yours," she said simply. "And others like you who call this planet home." Arthur frowned. "With respect, that seems like an arbitrary distinction. Danger is danger, regardless of its source." "Is it?" Her gaze sharpened. "If I intervened in every crisis, what would happen to humanity's capacity to defend itself? To grow beyond its limitations?" She set her cup down with perfect precision. "A child who never faces challenges never develops strength." "I would have appreciated your intervention nonetheless," Arthur said dryly. "I expected to die that day. If Captain Marvel hadn't arrived when she did, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Yet here we are." The Ancient One refilled their cups. "That incident is precisely why I took notice of you, Mr. Hayes. You're quite remarkable. You knew exactly when Carol Danvers would return to Earth. You recognized who I am without introduction." Her eyes met his directly. "How is that possible?" Arthur considered his response carefully. This was perhaps his only opportunity to speak freely about the burden he carried. "Before I answer that," he said, "may I ask you something? What exactly do you see when you use the Time Stone? Do you truly see the future?" If she was surprised by his knowledge of the Eye of Agamotto, she hid it well. "Another piece of knowledge you shouldn't possess," she noted softly. "You grow more interesting by the minute, Arthur Hayes. Will you answer my question?" The Ancient One studied him, seeming to weigh multiple possibilities before responding. "The future isn't a single fixed path, Mr. Hayes," she finally said. "What the eye reveals isn't the future, but possibilities, countless branches extending outward from each moment. The smallest change, even just me seeing the future through the eye, can cascade into entirely different outcomes. So there's no single predetermined timeline. In theory, there should be," she acknowledged. "But in practice, with so many forces capable of manipulating time, dimensions, and realities, no future is truly fixed until it becomes the present." Arthur leaned forward slightly. "But what if someone had knowledge of one specific future? A single timeline that may or may not be this one?" "What do you mean?" "I have memories," Arthur said quietly. "Since birth. Memories of events yet to come, a future where I don't exist and there are no wizards like me. Different but still the same in many ways." He felt strangely relieved to finally share this burden with someone. For the wielder of the Time Stone, knowledge of possible futures shouldn't be shocking. And Arthur found himself wanting, perhaps needing, to tell a part of his secret to someone who might understand. "My memories are like watching from the outside, seeing everything that will happen." The Ancient One's expression remained neutral, but her full attention focused on him with almost physical intensity. "That would be highly unusual," she said carefully. "The most plausible explanation might be that someone traveled backward in time and somehow imprinted their memories into you. Such things have happened before." "So what happens now?" Arthur asked. "Am I considered a threat to the natural order? Are you going to wipe my memories?" A hint of amusement touched her lips. "What makes you think that?" "My intervention nearly destroyed Earth," Arthur pointed out. "In my memories, Carol Danvers handled the Kree threat alone. The planet was never endangered. Yet everything resolved itself, didn't it?" She poured more tea with steady hands. "I don't make a habit of interfering with the natural flow of events, Mr. Hayes, even when that flow includes someone with knowledge of possible futures." She smiled faintly. "If I did, I would have my hands perpetually full. And as you noted, this world runs differently than you remember. It has wizards. So things might not always proceed as you expect, Mr. Hayes. That's surprisingly reassuring, Arthur admitted. Had I known that, I might have visited this place earlier. Perhaps the time wasn't right until now. The Ancient One set her empty cup down with finality. Now that we've addressed your concerns, I believe you came here with more than philosophical questions. I did, Arthur confirmed. I'm interested in learning sorcery. The mystical arts, she corrected, her eyes reflecting something between amusement and interest. And that, Arthur Hayes, may prove more challenging than you anticipate. Chapter 66, Dimensional Energy. Dawn crept across the Himalayan peaks, painting Kamarage in gold and shadow. Arthur stood among 20 other initiates in the ancient courtyard, the rough fabric of his grey apprentice robe still unfamiliar against his skin. The mountain air carried a biting chill despite the sunlight. Master Ilhakpa moved with fluid precision at the center of their formation. Golden light flowed between his hands like luminous water, forming intricate patterns that seemed both mathematical and organic. Focus, he instructed, his voice firm but patient. The dimensional energies surround us constantly. You need not create power, merely channel what already exists. Arthur mimicked the circular hand gestures precisely, feeling nothing but the morning breeze against his fingertips. 2 days of identical movements had yielded nothing but frustration and sore wrists. His fingers remained stubbornly ordinary, no light, no energy, no magic. Your form is perfect, a calm voice observed from behind him. But your approach remains flawed. The other students straightened immediately as the Ancient One materialized beside Arthur. Her presence seemed to sharpen the air itself. I'm doing exactly what Master Ilhakpa demonstrated, Arthur replied, unable to keep a defensive edge from his voice. Yes, physically. She observed, studying his movements. But your instinct is still to draw power from within. You're reaching for your magical core when you should be opening yourself to what exists beyond it. Arthur's jaw tightened. I'm trying. Yes, she replied with the faintest smile. That's precisely the problem. Master Ilhakpa, continue with the others. Mr. Hayes will join me for specialized instruction. The master nodded once and returned to instructing the remaining students. Arthur followed the Ancient One to a secluded balcony that offered a breathtaking view of snow-capped mountains stretching to the horizon. Wizards struggle significantly with our arts, she explained once they were alone. Far more than ordinary humans with no magical training. Why? She created a delicate mandala with casual precision, golden light dancing between her fingertips. Magic has shaped your very being, Mr. Hayes. Your body is a finely tuned instrument designed to channel internal power. The light pattern collapsed. When you attempt to connect with dimensional energy, muscle memory betrays you reaching inward when you should be reaching outward. So it's impossible for wizards to learn sorcery. Arthur frowned. I didn't say that. A hint of amusement touched her eyes. Only that it requires recalibration. No wizard in my memory has mastered both forms, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. Arthur considered this. What if I blocked my magical core completely? Forced myself to use only dimensional energy? That approach might work temporarily, she acknowledged. But when you eventually removed those blocks, you would face a difficult choice. Your body would likely reject one form of magic or the other. The reintegration process could take years, with no guarantee of success. And my current condition? Arthur asked. My pathways are damaged but intact. Does that help or hurt my chances? The Ancient One studied him with unsettling intensity, as if seeing beyond his physical form. Your situation is unusual. The channels through which magic flows remain in place, though temporarily unusable for your internal power. She circled around him, her movements deliberate. This may actually prove advantageous. You can focus on learning dimensional channeling without interference from your own magic flowing through the channels. The process might even strengthen your damaged pathways. But then won't I face another problem in the future, Arthur noted. Controlling 2 different energy sources through the same channels. True, she stopped before him. But perhaps it's best to solve one problem at a time. The mountain is climbed step by step, not in a single bound. Arthur hesitated. Have you used the Eye of Agamotto to see if I succeed? Do I ever master the mystic arts in any potential future? Her expression grew carefully neutral. You know I won't answer that. Can't or won't? Both, she replied without hesitation. Some knowledge must be earned through experience, not given freely. Whether you master our arts is for you to discover, not for me to reveal. Arthur sighed. Fair enough. So how do I stop trying to use my internal magic? Begin with control, she said simply. Your soul possesses the necessary strength, but your focus wavers. Master Singh teaches meditation techniques that might prove valuable to you. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Arthur alone with his thoughts and the panoramic view of the Himalayas. Arthur remained on the balcony long after she'd gone, watching clouds drift between distant peaks. He gripped the stone railing, confronting a truth he'd been avoiding for months. The Ravenclaw diadem. Since acquiring it, he had grown steadily dependent on its effects. What had begun as an occasional enhancement had become a crutch he could barely function without. The diadem's gift of mental clarity and focus had slowly eroded his natural abilities until, without it, he felt almost helpless. This explained his continued difficulties with his transformed magic. If he had learned to control magic properly from the beginning, mastering each complex spell through discipline rather than relying on the diadem's enhancement, he wouldn't face such challenges now. He knew with certainty that if he used the diadem, he could master the mystic arts in a fraction of the time. The artifact would grant him the perfect focus and mental clarity needed to channel dimensional energy. But then what? He would remain forever dependent on it, helpless without its power. No. The only viable solution was to forget about the diadem entirely and rebuild his own strength from the foundation up. As he turned from the balcony, he made a silent promise: in the future, he would use the artifact only for acquiring new knowledge, never for practice or implementation. It was time to rediscover his own capabilities. Empty your cup, Master Singh instructed the following morning. The elderly sorcerer sat cross-legged on a worn mat, his leathery face as serene as if he'd been carved from the mountains themselves. Arthur mirrored his pose, already feeling discomfort in his hips and lower back. What does that mean? Arthur asked. Empty my cup. A cup already filled cannot receive new tea, Singh replied, his English accented but precise. A mind filled with knowledge cannot receive wisdom. A body tense with effort cannot channel energy. So I need to forget what I know. Singh's eyes remained closed. Knowledge is not the problem. Attachment to knowledge is the problem. Technique is not the obstacle. Clinging to technique is the obstacle. Arthur closed his eyes, attempting to follow instructions that seemed deliberately paradoxical. The mental discipline he'd once possessed felt like a distant memory, his thoughts darting in countless directions simultaneously. Begin with your breath, Singh murmured. Not controlling it. Not changing it. Simply observing. Days stretched into a week as Arthur devoted himself entirely to meditation. He abandoned his daily magical exercises, focusing solely on regaining what he had lost control of his own mind. At first, he could maintain focus for only minutes before hunger, discomfort, or random thoughts intruded. Each time his concentration broke, Singh would simply say, "Notice," and return, neither praising nor criticizing. Gradually, the intervals extended. Arthur learned to acknowledge distractions without following them, to return his awareness to his breath with calm persistence rather than frustration. Master Singh proved a demanding but patient teacher. When Arthur could maintain basic meditation near the tranquil reflection pool, Singh moved their practice beside the sparring grounds. The clash of staffs, grunts of exertion, and occasional cries of pain tested Arthur's newfound concentration. The world will not become peaceful for your convenience, Singh remarked when Arthur's concentration broke during a particularly loud training session. Your mind must find stillness amid chaos. By the second week, Arthur could maintain meditative stillness from dawn until dusk, eating only a simple meal before sleep. The inward focus began revealing subtle sensations he'd never noticed: the flow of blood through his veins, the electrical impulses of his nervous system, and eventually, something deeper. He began sensing something vast. Oceans of energy existing just beyond ordinary perception. One morning, as sunlight crept across the meditation chamber, the Ancient One appeared silently beside him. Arthur remained motionless, not even noticing her presence. After observing him for several minutes, she reached out with one finger, its tip glowing with golden energy, and lightly touched his forehead. The contact broke his trance with gentle precision. Impressive, she noted as his eyes opened. Master Singh tells me you've maintained continuous meditation for 16 hours. Arthur blinked, reorienting himself to ordinary awareness. The time passes differently now. It's hard to describe. You seem changed, she observed. I feel. Arthur searched for words. Clearer. Like I've been looking through dirty glass my entire life without realizing it. That clarity is essential for what comes next. She rose to her feet in a fluid motion. Are you ready to try again? Arthur followed her to a private courtyard where morning shadows created intricate patterns across weathered stones. Close your eyes, she instructed. Return to the meditative state, but maintain awareness of your physical form. Arthur settled easily into the familiar stillness, his breath becoming shallow and unhurried. Now extend your awareness outward, her voice continued, seeming to bypass his ears and flow directly into his consciousness. Feel the energies surrounding you, currents flowing from dimensions beyond ordinary perception. Arthur reached out with his senses, no longer attempting to draw power but simply perceiving what already existed. Gradually, he became aware of currents flowing around him, invisible tides of energy from realms beyond ordinary perception. There, the Ancient One said softly. You feel it? Arthur remained silent, focused on the unfamiliar sensation. Imagine yourself not as a vessel to be filled, but as a window through which light passes, she continued. You don't capture this energy, you allow it passage through you, giving it direction and purpose. Arthur adjusted his mental approach, visualizing the energy flowing through him rather than into him. The sensation intensified, like standing in a stream rather than collecting water in a cup. Now, shape it, she instructed. Not with force, but with gentle direction. Like guiding water with your fingers. Arthur attempted the circular motion he'd been practicing, maintaining his connection to the dimensional current. For a brief moment, he felt something flow through his fingertips, not the familiar warmth of wizarding magic, but something cooler and more precise. A tiny spark of golden light flickered between his palms before vanishing. His eyes snapped open in surprise. A beginning, the Ancient One said, looking pleased. Small, but significant. That was different, Arthur admitted. Nothing like wizarding magic. Of course not. You were channeling energy from another dimension entirely. She gestured for him to try again. Wizarding magic comes from within, a biological gift passed through bloodlines. Our methods draw upon the vast energies of the multiverse itself. For the remainder of the morning, Arthur practiced under her guidance. By midday, he could consistently produce small sparks, though nothing approaching the complex patterns other students were already mastering. You're making exceptional progress for a wizard, the Ancient One assured him when frustration threatened to derail his practice. The fact that you've produced any effects at all is remarkable. Arthur watched her walk away, her words only partially alleviating his disappointment. 2 weeks of intensive training to produce mere sparks seemed painfully slow. Most beginners achieved similar results in days, not weeks. He needed to work harder. The days at Kamarage fell into a rhythm. Morning meditation with Master Singh. Afternoon practice channeling dimensional energy with Master Lakpa. Evening meditation and reflection. Each day brought incremental improvements, sparks growing brighter, lasting longer, becoming easier to summon. A week after his first success, Arthur finally managed to form a small, unstable shield of golden energy between his hands. Master Lakpa nodded approvingly as the light flickered and danced before dissipating. Very good, the sorcerer said. Your progress accelerates. Soon you may attempt gateway creation. Arthur was about to ask a question when a commotion at the main entrance drew everyone's attention. The Ancient One appeared, leading a man with a haunted expression. He walked with the careful movements of someone whose world had recently shattered. Arthur recognized him instantly. Kilius. The future zealot who would betray Kamarage, steal forbidden knowledge, and ultimately lead to the Ancient One's death looked nothing like the dangerous fanatic Arthur remembered. Instead, he appeared broken, desperate, and profoundly lost. Their gazes met briefly as the Ancient One guided Kilius toward the inner sanctum. She gave Arthur a subtle headshake and reassuring smile as they passed. As they disappeared inside, Arthur returned to his practice with renewed focus. He hadn't expected his training to coincide with Kilius's arrival, but this coincidence presented an opportunity. If the Ancient One was willing to teach the man despite knowing of his eventual betrayal, Arthur would make certain he stayed one step ahead of the future zealot. He would become the opponent Kilius could never defeat. Always better than him at everything and someone Kilius would always fear before doing anything evil. He did not plan on doing anything else about Kilius. Since the Ancient One with more knowledge and experience than him did not plan on interfering, who was he to intervene? However, Arthur promised himself he would always remain one step ahead of Kilius. It was good to have a genius as an adversary, especially someone like Kilius, who was known for his exceptional talent in the mystic arts. Measuring his own progress against such an opponent would greatly aid Arthur on his learning journey. The goal seemed almost impossible in his current state. But Arthur knew his limitations were temporary. When he finally overcame them, his true talent would begin to show and Kilius would face an adversary beyond his comprehension. The golden energy between Arthur's palms stabilized, growing brighter as his determination solidified into resolve. Chapter 67, Dark Paths. The sun hung low over the Himalayan peaks, painting the mountains in amber and gold. Arthur's final practice session had left him drained but satisfied. The golden shield he'd sustained for nearly 5 minutes represented genuine progress, even if it paled compared to what other students accomplished. He wiped sweat from his brow and headed toward the secluded balcony where he'd first spoken with the Ancient One. Some instinct told him she would be there. As he climbed the winding stone steps, the mountain breeze sharpened, carrying the scent of snow and distant juniper. His muscles ached pleasantly from exertion. The Ancient One stood gazing out at the vista, her back to him, seemingly lost in contemplation. "Your progress accelerates," she said without turning. "The clarity you've regained serves you well." Arthur approached the stone balustrade. "You were expecting me?" Questions follow revelations as naturally as night follows day. She turned to face him, her expression serene but evaluating. "You want to ask about Kilius?" The directness caught him slightly off guard, though it shouldn't have. He'd gradually learned that conversation with the Ancient One rarely included small talk. "Yes. You know who he is?" Arthur kept his voice carefully neutral. "What he becomes? I've seen possibilities." Her gaze drifted back to the mountains, fingers lightly tracing patterns in the air. "Many possibilities. Then why accept him as a student?" Arthur turned to face her fully. "When you know he'll betray everything you stand for. That he'll turn to Dormammu and try to destroy the sanctums." The Ancient One remained silent, her breathing steady as if in meditation. When she spoke, her voice carried neither defensiveness nor judgment. "We do not discriminate, Mr. Hayes." A faint breeze stirred her robes. "Our knowledge is open to everyone who seeks understanding of the mystic arts." "This isn't about hypotheticals," Arthur countered, crossing his arms. "His entire purpose for being here is to gain power to bring back his dead family. He'll stop at nothing." "And yours?" Her eyes met his now, penetrating and uncomfortably perceptive. "What is your purpose for being here?" Arthur blinked, caught off guard by the redirection. "To learn. To master another form of magic." "For what end?" She pressed, stepping closer. "Power? Security? Control." "To protect myself and mine," he replied, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. "To be prepared for what's coming." A noble intention. She traced a small golden circle in the air. Kilius would say the same about his goals. "It's not the same thing." Arthur's jaw tightened. "Isn't it?" The Ancient One's voice remained calm, but something in it sharpened like a blade. "Both of you seek power for purposes you deem worthy. The difference lies only in your judgment." "My knowledge won't lead to mass destruction," Arthur insisted. "Are you certain?" Her question hung in the cooling air. "In many potential futures I've glimpsed, you walk paths as dark as his, perhaps darker, given your unique knowledge." The statement hit Arthur like a physical blow. He stared at her, momentarily speechless. "What are you talking about?" he finally managed. "Exactly what I said." Her expression held no accusation, only profound sadness. "In several possible timelines, you become willing to sacrifice anything and anyone to achieve your goals." Arthur stepped back from the railing. "That's impossible. I would never." "Never?" Her eyebrow arched slightly. "Can't you think of any reason?" Arthur fell silent, his certainty suddenly shakier than the hanging bridges connecting Kamarage's towers. "The only way that happens is if I lose someone important to me. Someone I care about deeply." He paused, frowning. "But will I ever care for someone that much?" "I cannot answer that." "Of course not. That would be too straightforward." Arthur's laugh held no humor. "Though I can't imagine myself following such a cliched villain origin story. Wizard gets sad, decides to destroy world. Hardly original." The Ancient One's lips twitched, almost smiling despite the gravity of their conversation. "If I follow such a path," Arthur said slowly, "it would only be because I failed to become strong enough to protect my close ones." His fingers drummed against the stone. "Which means I need to work harder." The Ancient One studied him, tracing a finger absently along the weathered balustrade. Knowing this about yourself, she asked, are you still so quick to condemn Kilius for choices he hasn't yet made? Yes. Arthur met her gaze without hesitation. I make no claim to nobility or selflessness. I'm comfortable with my contradictions. But I'd never allow someone I knew to be dangerous to gain power they'll misuse. You have more in common with him than you realize. She nodded toward the courtyard below, where evening lanterns had begun to glow like earthbound stars. Both brilliant. Both driven by loss. Both certain of your own righteousness. Maybe so. Arthur leaned against the railing. But unlike him, I understand that my actions will have consequences. I cannot say the same about him. You know his future actions, not his present mind, she replied. Just as I cannot know if your future paths will mirror what I've glimpsed. And yet you train us both, Arthur observed. Yes. Because potential is not destiny. I just hope your faith in him proves justified, Arthur sighed and said. Though I wouldn't bet on it. They stood in silence as darkness claimed the mountains, stars emerging in the deepening indigo sky. The air grew sharper with cold. How do you bear it? Arthur finally asked, his voice quieter. The weight of seeing all these futures, knowing the tragedies that might unfold, but choosing not to prevent them. The question seemed to surprise her. She considered it with genuine thoughtfulness. I am guardian of reality's mystical integrity, not its author, she replied, her fingers absently tracing patterns that left faint golden trails. I observe. I prepare. I intervene only when dimensional threats emerge. She turned to him fully. You struggle because you still believe you can and should control everything. That the burden of the universe rests on your shoulders alone. I know of so many pointless deaths, Arthur admitted, his voice tight. The simplest actions could prevent them. And create new ones you cannot foresee, she countered gently. The greatest arrogance is believing we can predict all consequences of our interventions. Arthur stared out at the darkened valley, lights of distant villages twinkling like fallen stars. These possible disasters haunt me. Then let them be ghosts, not chains. Her voice softened. Act with compassion when opportunity presents itself, but release the illusion that you must orchestrate every life and death. The mountain wind stirred, carrying the distant sound of a meditation bell. Your evening practice awaits, she observed. Master Singh speaks highly of your progress. Arthur recognized the gentle dismissal. Yes. Now that I know I have the potential to go full supervillain, I should definitely practice harder. He offered a sardonic half-smile. Nothing motivates like existential dread. One last thing, Mr. Hayes. She turned back to the mountains. Watch Kilius closely in the coming weeks. Not as an adversary to be defeated, but as a mirror. You might learn more about yourself than you expect. Arthur descended the stone steps, the Ancient One's words following him like shadows. The following morning brought a tense new dynamic to the training courtyard. Kilius joined the beginner's circle, his grief-hollowed eyes surveying the other students with barely concealed impatience. The desperate drive to learn to find whatever knowledge might reunite him with his family radiated from him like heat from fire. Arthur watched from across the courtyard, where he practiced more complex shielding patterns. He couldn't help but notice how the other students unconsciously made space for Kilius, responding to something in his demeanor that marked him as different. Master Ulhakpa's instructions floated across the courtyard. Channel the energy. Do not force it. Allow it to flow through you. Arthur refocused on his own practice, determined not to be distracted. But he couldn't help glancing over when exclamations of surprise erupted from the beginner's circle. Golden sparks danced between Kilius's fingers, not the faint flickers Arthur had struggled for weeks to produce, but bright, sustained energy that formed perfect circles in the air. Exceptional, Mr. Kilius, Master Ulhakpa praised. You have natural affinity for the mystic arts. Arthur's shield flickered and died as his concentration broke. A familiar burn of competitive fire ignited in his chest. In a single session, this future villain had accomplished what had taken Arthur weeks of grueling effort. The display shouldn't have surprised him, Kilius had been a prodigy in the timeline Arthur remembered. But witnessing it firsthand sent a jolt of competitive energy through him. He needed to work harder. He would not let a future villain surpass him. And he would never, under any circumstances, become what the Ancient One had foreseen. Some futures simply weren't acceptable. Chapter 68, The Art of Rivalry. Days blended into weeks of rigorous training. Arthur's progress with the mystic arts had become steadier each morning, bringing new insights, each evening ending with measurable improvement. The endless repetition of forms and meditation had begun to reshape not just his abilities, but his thinking. Mid-August arrived with an unexpected interruption. Arthur had just completed his morning meditation when a distinctive crack echoed across the garden, startling nearby students. A small figure materialized beside a flowering plum tree, drawing curious stares from those unaccustomed to magical transportation. Winky stood proudly, clutching several official-looking envelopes, seemingly unbothered by the altitude or the journey. "Master Hayes!" she exclaimed, eyes bright with excitement. "Your examination results have arrived." Several students whispered among themselves, eyeing the strange creature with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Arthur calmly approached her. "Thank you, Winky." There was nothing blocking house elves from coming to Kamarage, and Arthur ensured he made the most of it. He could leave any time with Winky if he needed to do something in London, though such trips were rare. More importantly, she brought him daily news about both the Muggle and Wizarding worlds. He had heard about the Dementor attack on Harry Potter and the hate campaign against him in the Daily Prophet. Everything was proceeding according to his foreknowledge of events. No serious changes had occurred that would require his intervention, which was a relief. "What is this, creature?" a voice asked from behind. Arthur turned to find Kilius watching with undisguised interest. It was the first time the man had directly initiated conversation. "She's not a creature," Arthur replied coolly. "She's Winky and she is a house elf from the Wizarding world. Another world with another form of magic entirely." "Fascinating." Kilius's eyes narrowed slightly as he studied the small being. "This world is full of such fascinating things," Arthur said with a thin smile. "You are in for a treat. You have just stepped one foot into it right now." "Glad to hear." Kilius clasped his hands behind his back, his posture perfectly straight. "How are you finding Kamarage so far?" Arthur asked. "Enlightening." Kilius's eyes never left Winky. "Can someone learn your form of magic?" "No. You need to be born with it." Arthur shook his head. "But you're not missing much. Most of the magic is the same." "Unfortunate. I would have liked to learn wizarding magic." A fleeting expression of disappointment crossed Kilius's face. "Many wizards would have liked to learn mystic arts too, but not everyone can." Arthur adjusted his training robe. "But you can." Kilius's eyes finally shifted to Arthur's face, studying him with renewed interest. "Let's just say when one door closes, another one opens up." Arthur took a step back. "Sorry, I have to go. It was good talking to you." Then Arthur left the training area with Winky. Finding a quiet corner of the garden, Arthur broke the seal on the first envelope. Inside lay his Hogwarts Newt results, 10 outstandings across all subjects. Exactly as expected. The wizarding qualifications mattered little now, but completeness was satisfying. The second envelope contained his A-level results, straight A grades across all 5 subjects. With these, his path to MIT remained clear. The next step would be registering for October's SAT examinations. "All good news?" Winky asked, bouncing slightly on her toes. "Perfect scores," Arthur confirmed. "I'll need to return to London briefly to register for my next examinations." Winky's entire face brightened. "Winky can bring Master Hayes anytime. The manor has been kept spotless and ready." "I appreciate that." Arthur noticed her barely contained enthusiasm. "Have you been bored on your own?" The house elf's ears drooped slightly. "Winky loves caring for Master's homes, but..." She hesitated. Sometimes Winky wishes for more tasks. Arthur considered this. Keeping her occupied would be beneficial for both of them. "How would you feel about visiting Hogwarts occasionally? You could help the elves there and perhaps play around with Dobby." "Dobby?" Winky's eyes widened. "He serves the Potter boy now." "So he took my advice," Arthur murmured, pleased his suggestion had been followed. "You can follow him around. Interesting things always happen around Harry Potter." Winky's enthusiasm returned instantly. Winky would be honored to help Master gather information. "Not spying," Arthur clarified, knowing exactly how house elf enthusiasm could lead to misunderstandings. "Be open about it and just let me know of the developments." "Of course, Master Hayes." Winky nodded solemnly, though her eyes sparkled with anticipation of having a mission. "I'll return to London this weekend," Arthur decided. "For now, you should go back. I need to continue my training." With another crack, Winky disappeared, leaving Arthur alone with his thoughts and plans. Even with the mystic arts consuming most of his energy, the technological education remained crucial to his long-term strategy. Both disciplines would be necessary for what lay ahead. Arthur tucked the results away thoughtfully. His plans were proceeding as intended, even if his timeline had been adjusted due to his magical injury. The dual path mystic arts and technological mastery would provide the foundation he needed. The afternoon training session focused on defensive applications of mystic energy. Students paired off to practice shielding against various attacks. Master Ilhakpa surveyed the courtyard thoughtfully. "Hayes, Kilius," he called. "You two will demonstrate today." The other students formed a circle around them, eager to witness the contest. Arthur and Kilius faced each other, each taking the traditional opening stance. "Begin with basic shields," Master Ilhakpa instructed. "Then progress to more complex forms." Kilius moved first, golden energy flowing from his fingertips to form a perfect circle of light. Arthur countered with his own, slightly larger and more densely woven. "Good," Master Ilhakpa nodded. "Now, simple attacks against each other's shields." Kilius sent a lance of energy toward Arthur's shield. It struck with precision but dissipated harmlessly. Arthur returned the gesture, his bolt slightly stronger, making Kilius's shield flare brightly upon impact. The exchange continued, their attacks growing progressively more complex. Arthur noted how quickly Kilius adapted, each new pattern more intricate than the last. His natural talent was undeniable. "You've been practicing beyond the assigned forms," Arthur observed during a brief pause. "As have you." Kilius's next attack came as a flurry of energy darts from multiple angles. Arthur's shield morphed into a dome, intercepting all incoming projectiles. A murmur of appreciation rippled through the watching students. "Remember your fundamentals," Master Ilhakpa called. "Power flows from control, not force." Arthur felt the familiar rhythm of combat settling into his movements. This wasn't so different from wizard dueling, anticipating your opponent's intentions, conserving energy, looking for patterns. Kilius pressed harder, his frustration growing visible as Arthur deflected each attack. His final strike came as a whip of golden energy that cracked against Arthur's shield with genuine force. "Enough," Master Ilhakpa intervened. "This is a demonstration, not a battle." Arthur lowered his shield, noting the thin sheen of sweat on Kilius's forehead. Their eyes met in silent acknowledgement. This contest was far from settled. "You rely too heavily on brute force," Arthur told him quietly as they returned to the circle of students. "And you fight defensively," Kilius countered. "As if afraid to reveal your true capabilities." "No, that is what I am working on." "Control." Arthur rolled his shoulders, releasing tension. Kilius was not satisfied with the answer, but Arthur was telling the truth. He had seen the masters practice in the courtyard and they relied more on graceful defense and attacks and not brute force. Arthur wanted to learn that. As the training concluded, Master Ilhakpa gathered the most promising students after evening practice. His normally stern expression had softened with something like pride. "Tomorrow," he announced, looking over the assembled group, "those who have mastered basic energy manipulation will begin the next phase of training." His hands swept through a circular motion, golden light trailing his movements. "You will learn to create gateways between locations, the foundation of a sorcerer's mobility." Arthur's eyes drifted across the courtyard, finding Kilius at the group's edge. Their gazes locked in silent challenge, the next contest already beginning before the current one had fully ended. Who would master gateways first? Who would advance faster? The questions hung unspoken between them. Arthur embraced the rivalry. Competition had always driven him to break through limitations that others accepted as fixed. With Mordo and Wong likely years from arriving at Kamarage, Kilius was the only student besides himself that Arthur recognized from his future knowledge. This shared significance, though only Arthur knew of it, created an unusual connection between them. The rivalry forming between them wasn't Arthur's preference. He had never sought equals among peers, his sights were set higher. The Ancient One, Master Singh, Master Ilhakpa, these were the benchmarks that mattered. Kilius, talented as he might be, was merely a waypoint on Arthur's journey. A measure of progress, not a destination. Let Kilius excel at learning forms quickly. Let him master the initial lessons with natural talent. Arthur's temporary limitations would soon fade, and when they did, the gap between them would widen beyond closing. Today's close match would become tomorrow's decisive victory. He returned Kilius's stare with a calm confidence that bordered on dismissal. Tomorrow would bring them one step closer to seeing who truly had the greater potential. And it wasn't the man who would one day serve Dormammu. Chapter 69, Spatial Affinities. Dawn broke over Kamarage with a soft golden glow that filtered through the ancient windows. The compound hummed with quiet energy as students prepared for the day's training. Anticipation hung in the air. Today they would begin learning to create gateways, one of the most practical and impressive abilities of the mystic arts. Arthur arrived early, completing his morning meditation before most others had even entered the courtyard. His fingers traced the carved patterns on a nearby pillar as he waited, mentally reviewing the dimensional energy pathways he'd been studying. Master Lhakpa appeared carrying a lacquered wooden box. As students gathered, he opened it to reveal rows of metallic rings, each sized to fit 2 fingers. Sling rings, he announced, lifting one for all to see. The focus through which you will learn to fold space and create pathways between distant points. He began distributing them, placing each ring directly into a student's palm with a nod. Arthur examined the metal circle. Unlike a wand, it contained no inherent magic, merely a conduit for the user's will and energy. Yet something about it felt familiar, almost comfortable against his skin. Form a circle, Master Lhakpa instructed once everyone had received their rings. Today we begin one of the most practical applications of the mystic arts. 20 students arranged themselves in a wide ring around the master. Arthur found himself directly across from Kilius, who was already wearing his sling ring, fingers positioned as if ready to begin before instructions were even given. The sling ring focuses your intention, Master Lhakpa explained, demonstrating the proper hand position. Place it on these 2 fingers, like so. Your other hand creates the circular motion that defines the gateway's form. He demonstrated the gesture slowly. Visualization is crucial. You must see your destination clearly in your mind before attempting to open a pathway to it. Arthur slipped the ring onto his fingers, adjusting it until it felt secure. For beginners, I suggest focusing on a location within Kamarage first, perhaps the library or your sleeping quarters. Familiarity makes visualization easier. Arthur closed his eyes, but rather than picturing the library, his thoughts drifted to his London townhouse. The drawing room with its high ceilings and elegant furnishings emerged with surprising clarity in his mind. Begin, Master Lhakpa instructed. Around the circle, students raised their hands, making circular motions with varying degrees of confidence. A few produced faint sparks, nothing more. Arthur took a deep breath, centering himself as Master Singh had taught him. He then moved his hand in a steady circular motion, feeling energy flow not just through his body but around it. The sling ring warmed against his skin. Something shifted in the air before him. Arthur opened his eyes and froze in astonishment. A perfect golden circle hovered before him, and through it, clearly visible as if through an open window, was his London drawing room, exactly as he'd pictured it. A portal. On his first attempt. The courtyard fell silent. Master Lhakpa stepped forward, genuine surprise evident in his usually impassive features. Extraordinary, he murmured, inspecting the gateway. Perfect form, stable energy flow, and significant distance. He met Arthur's gaze. Most unexpected. Across the circle, Kilius stared at the portal with undisguised frustration. His own hands had produced only golden sparks despite his intense concentration. How did you do that? Asked a student to Arthur's right, abandoning her own attempt. Arthur shook his head slightly, equally surprised. I don't know. It just happened. And it had. For the first time since his magical core had been altered, something had worked immediately, without the grueling practice everything else required. The portal felt right, intuitive in a way nothing else had been. Arthur's mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps it was simply because he was accustomed to channeling magic through an object, his wand making the sling ring feel natural where bare-handed mystic arts had felt foreign. Or perhaps a more intriguing possibility emerged. His contact with the Tesseract, the Space Stone. Could that exposure have somehow enhanced his affinity for spatial manipulation? It would explain why this specific aspect of the mystic arts came so naturally while others remained challenging. Master Lhakpa circled the gateway, examining it from all angles. Impressive for a first attempt, he said, clearly puzzled by Arthur's sudden proficiency. Arthur maintained the portal, adjusting his fingers slightly to test its stability. The gateway remained solid, its edges crisp and unwavering. May I? He asked, gesturing toward the opening. Master Lhakpa considered for a moment, then nodded. Briefly. Return immediately. Arthur stepped through the golden circle and into his London home. The transition was seamless, no discomfort, no disorientation, nothing like the nauseating compression of apparition or the disorienting spin of fluid travel. One moment he stood in the Himalayan mountains, the next on plush carpet thousands of miles away. A quick glance confirmed the house was exactly as he'd left it. Arthur turned and stepped back through the portal into Kamarage, feeling a faint tingle as he crossed the threshold. The other students were now crowded around, watching with a mixture of admiration and envy. Only Kilius remained in his position, his jaw tight with determination as he continued his attempts. "Very good, Mr. Hayes," Master Lhakpa said. "Now close it and try again with a different location. Perhaps somewhere within the compound." Arthur nodded, letting the gateway collapse with a simple gesture. Golden light folded in on itself until nothing remained. As the morning progressed, Arthur created increasingly complex portals, first to various locations within Kamarage, then to distant places he'd visited. By midday, he could open multiple gateways simultaneously, holding them stable with minimal effort. When the session ended, Kilius approached him. Unlike the previous day, there was no pretense of casual conversation. "How did you learn that so quickly?" he demanded, his voice low but intense. Arthur considered his answer carefully. "I'm not entirely sure myself. Perhaps my previous experience with magical transportation helped." Kilius's eyes narrowed. "Nothing comes that easily." "Not normally," Arthur agreed. "I'm as surprised as you are." Kilius studied him for a moment longer, then turned away without another word. Arthur watched him go, noting the tightness in his shoulders, the rigid control in his movements. Later that afternoon, a young acolyte approached Arthur during his solitary practice. "The Ancient One requests your presence," she said with a small bow. Arthur found the Sorcerer Supreme in a small courtyard garden he hadn't visited before. Stone benches surrounded a shallow pool where golden fish swam in lazy circles. "Your progress with gateways has been noted," she said without preamble. "Master Lhakpa is quite impressed." Arthur took a seat across from her. "It surprised me as well. Do you have a theory?" Her eyes studied him with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see beyond surface thoughts. "Two, actually." Arthur met her gaze directly. "Either I'm naturally attuned to working with magical foci like the sling ring because of my wizarding background, or..." He hesitated, then continued, "My exposure to the space stone altered something fundamental in me. Enhanced my connection to spatial energies." The Ancient One's expression revealed nothing. "Interesting theories. The space stone is one of the most powerful spatial manipulation artifacts in existence. Even brief contact could potentially alter one's magical affinities." She stood in a fluid motion. "Let us test your theory. There is another technique that involves spatial manipulation, but also requires control over matter itself." With a swift, elegant gesture, her fingers traced intricate patterns in the air. The world around them seemed to fracture and shift, reality splintering into crystalline facets as they entered the mirror dimension. "This realm exists alongside our own," she explained as Arthur looked around in fascination. "A parallel space where we can practice and observe without affecting the physical world." She demonstrated the hand movements again, slower this time. "Try it. Concentrate on both folding space and altering its fundamental structure." Arthur mimicked her gestures, focusing his energy as he had with the portals. For nearly a minute, golden light gathered at his fingertips, reality beginning to ripple around him, but then the energy destabilized, dissipating in a shower of sparks. The Ancient One circled him thoughtfully. "Your theory appears correct. You excel at pure spatial manipulation, but struggle with the matter component of this technique." "So the space stone did affect me?" Arthur asked. "Almost certainly. Your entire being seems to have developed an enhanced affinity for spatial magic." She adjusted his hand position slightly. "The mirror dimension requires proficiency in both space and matter. Try again, but focus more on the material aspect." For the remainder of the day, they practiced together. Arthur struggled initially, able to create the spatial shift but not maintain the structural integrity of the mirror dimension. The Ancient One adjusted his technique, demonstrating subtle variations in energy flow and hand position. By sunset, Arthur had finally managed to create and maintain a stable mirror dimension pocket around them. Though it lacked the elegant complexity of the Ancient One's version, it held firm. "Excellent progress," she acknowledged as they returned to normal reality. "Your spatial affinity is remarkable, and your matter manipulation is improving." Arthur flexed his fingers, feeling the familiar magical exhaustion that came with mastering new techniques. Does this mean I could potentially learn to use the space stone itself? The Ancient One gave him a sharp look. That is not a path I would recommend exploring. The Infinity Stones are not tools to be wielded lightly. Theoretical question only, Arthur assured her, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. The Ancient One turned toward the doorway. Tomorrow, continue practicing the mirror dimension. When you can maintain it without conscious effort, come find me. There are other spatial applications I believe you might excel at. As she departed, Arthur remained in the garden, contemplating this unexpected development. The Space Stone's influence had given him an edge he hadn't anticipated, a natural affinity for one of the most useful aspects of the mystic arts. He created one more portal, this time to his room at Kamarage. Through it, he could see his few possessions, the narrow bed, the small desk where he kept his notes. Arthur stepped through, closing the gateway behind him. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of genuine progress. His magical core might never be what it was, but perhaps it was becoming something more interesting. Chapter 70, The Making of Adversaries. Golden leaves drifted past the windows of Kamarage as autumn painted the distant mountains in brilliant colors. A month had passed since Arthur's first portal creation, bringing dramatic changes to his capabilities with the mystic arts. His progress with spatial manipulation had become the talk of the sanctuary. Where other students struggled for weeks to maintain stable portals beyond a few miles, Arthur could effortlessly open gateways to locations on the other side of the planet. The mirror dimension bent to his will with remarkable ease. He'd begun learning to manipulate space within it, altering distances, creating loops, and reshaping reality itself. Recently, he'd even started practicing astral projection. The technique proved invaluable for studying while his physical body slept, something he'd remembered from his knowledge of Strange's future methods. During these nocturnal excursions, he devoured the vast collection of tomes in the Kamarage library. Every moment had purpose now. Your affinity for spatial magic continues to impress, the Ancient One remarked during one of their private sessions in late September. She observed as Arthur maintained 3 separate portals simultaneously, one to London, one to New York, and one to Hong Kong. You've achieved in months what takes most sorcerers years to master. Arthur closed the portals with a fluid gesture. But my progress in other areas remains inconsistent. For your sake, I hope the other trainees didn't hear that, she said with a hint of amusement. Most of them will take years to get where you are now. Don't reach too high too fast. It's perfectly fine to have a specialty and be proud of it. Arthur nodded, though privately he remained determined to improve across all disciplines. While his spatial mastery had reached near master level, he pursued balanced advancement in every area. Your sparring matches with Kilius have become quite the spectacle, she continued. In these few months you two have reached a level many take years to reach. Kilius's progress has really been impressive, Arthur acknowledged. I guess having me defeat him in the sparring matches has made him work harder. Yes, the Ancient One agreed simply. Will this cause a stronger enemy for the sanctuary in the future? Arthur asked, testing her reaction. Or a protector? Arthur did not share such confidence. Despite their frequent training interactions, he maintained deliberate distance from Kilius. Knowing the man's eventual betrayal made genuine friendship impossible, that barrier always stopped him from engaging beyond necessity. Several times, Arthur had considered attempting to change Kilius's trajectory. But each conversation revealed the depth of his grief and fixation on restoring his lost family. The seeds of darkness were already deeply rooted. Arthur felt clueless about how to change that fundamental reality. Your afternoon sparring session begins soon, the Ancient One noted. Arthur nodded. These daily sparring matches had become routine and crucial. Using magic in actual combat helped him understand spells more deeply, making their application more fluid. This was something Arthur appreciated about Kamarage's training philosophy. Unlike Hogwarts, where duels were rare, students here learned to properly defend themselves in real combat situations. Later that afternoon, Arthur was packing a small bag when Kilius appeared in his doorway. Another trip to London? The man asked, leaning against the frame. Arthur didn't look up. SAT examinations tomorrow. Kilius always tried to interact with Arthur, recognizing that he possessed more knowledge about the world and other forms of magic. But Arthur had no interest in sharing anything with him. You're still pursuing that mundane path? Kilius entered uninvited, studying Arthur's sparse quarters. I don't understand the appeal of ordinary education when you could be mastering powers beyond imagination here. Different tools for different goals, Arthur replied, securing his bag. What goal requires learning basic mathematics when you can reshape reality itself? Kilius pressed, genuine curiosity in his voice. Arthur finally met his gaze. Maybe someday someone will defeat a sorcerer using technology learned at those ordinary schools. Kilius laughed, but the sound held no humor. Technology against magic? That's naive, Hayes. Arthur felt he must arrange for Iron Man to spar with Kilius in the future. That would be an interesting demonstration. Is it? Arthur opened a portal to London's busy streets. You assume magic is always superior. I prefer keeping options open. He stepped toward the gateway, then paused. You're brilliant, Kilius. But brilliance without wisdom leads to dangerous places. Before the other man could respond, Arthur stepped through the portal and disappeared. Arthur wondered briefly if his detachment and their rivalry might actually be pushing Kilius further toward his dark path. But Arthur wasn't too worried as long as the Ancient One was here, she could handle any developments. Time passed in its steady rhythm. November brought crisp, biting cold to Kamarage. The mountains disappeared behind low clouds for days at a time, and students increasingly practiced indoors. Arthur's SAT results had arrived perfect scores, as expected, and his MIT application was complete, submitted with confident expectation of acceptance. You applied only to MIT? Master Singh asked during a meditation session. No alternatives. No need, Arthur replied. My A-levels and SAT scores should easily get me admitted. The older sorcerer studied him thoughtfully. Confidence becomes arrogance when we fail to prepare for unexpected outcomes. Arthur merely smiled. He didn't think someone with his scores could get rejected. These were scores he could only have dreamed of in his previous life. Meanwhile, his mystic training continued advancing in distinctly uneven ways. While he had reached what many considered master-level proficiency in spatial manipulation, his progress in other areas remained merely above average. Kilius had developed impressive abilities with energy projection and matter transformation, though his attempts at spatial manipulation remained average. It created an interesting dynamic during their training sessions, each with distinct strengths, neither fully rounded. Sparring session after evening meditation, Master Ilhakpa announced to the advanced students. Hayes and Kilius will demonstrate combat applications. Arthur felt several students exchange glances. Their matches had become something of an event at Kamarage. The training hall filled with observers as evening approached. Students and masters gathered in a wide circle around the central practice area. Arthur and Kilius faced each other, bowing formally before taking their positions. Begin when ready, Master Ilhakpa called. Kilius moved first, hands tracing careful patterns through the air. Golden energy flowed from his fingers, forming into twin whips that cracked toward Arthur with impressive precision. Arthur raised his hands, constructing a basic shield of golden light. The whip struck it, sending sparks cascading to the floor. He felt the impact jar his arms. Kilius's power had definitely improved. Arthur retaliated with his own energy bolt, but Kilius deflected it easily with a circular shield. They exchanged several more attacks, each testing the other's defenses. Then Arthur saw his opening. As Kilius wound up for another whip attack, Arthur began the circular motion with his sling ring. The portal took only a second to fully form, but it was still long enough for Kilius to notice. Not this time, Kilius growled, redirecting his attack toward the forming gateway. Arthur quickly closed the unstable portal and rolled to the side, Kilius's energy whip scorching the floor where he'd been standing. You're getting predictable, Hayes, Kilius called out. Arthur didn't respond. Instead, he formed another shield to block an incoming energy dart, then began working his sling ring again. This time he completed the motion faster. The portal opened behind Kilius, but the man sensed it immediately and spun around. Arthur's energy bolt, fired through the gateway, passed harmlessly to the side. Kilius pressed his advantage, unleashing a barrage of energy constructs. Arthur found himself on the defensive, his shields taking hit after hit. Then suddenly Arthur smiled and opened a portal directly in front of his shield. Kilius's next attack passed through the gateway and... Arg! Kilius stumbled as his own energy bolt struck him in the back, emerging from the second portal Arthur had quietly opened behind him. The distraction was all Arthur needed. He closed the distance with enhanced speed and agility, tackling Kilius to the ground before the man could recover. They grappled briefly, but Arthur's physical prowess gave him the advantage. He pinned Kilius and manifested a simple energy blade at his throat. Match to Hayes, Master Hackpaw declared. The hall buzzed with conversations. Arthur helped Kilius to his feet, offering a respectful bow. But Kilius's face was flushed with frustration. Your portals are a crutch, he muttered low enough that only Arthur could hear. One day you'll face an opponent they can't save you from. Maybe, Arthur replied quietly. But not today. As the crowd dispersed, Arthur noticed the Ancient One watching from the shadows near the entrance. Her expression was unreadable, but something in her gaze suggested she saw more in their rivalry than simple competition. Arthur pushed the thought aside. Kilius's future was not his responsibility to change. His own path was clear: complete his mystic training, attend MIT, and prepare for the challenges he knew were coming. Some destinies couldn't be altered. Others were meant to be forged. And judging by the way Kilius stalked from the training hall, his jaw clenched with barely contained rage, Arthur wondered if he was witnessing the birth of something truly dangerous. The thought should have worried him more than it did. Chapter 71, Dimensions of Power. January's bitter cold had settled over Kamarage, blanketing the mountains in pristine snow. Arthur had grown accustomed to the rhythm of daily training, but something had been nagging at him for weeks. One evening, he sought out the Ancient One. He found her in the orrery, a vast chamber where mystical representations of celestial bodies drifted in silent ballet. Sorcerer Supreme, he began, offering a respectful bow. She turned, and he caught the hint of a smile. Mr. Hayes. You've become quite the frequent visitor to my chambers. Even Kilius doesn't seek me out half as often, and he has twice as many burning questions about forbidden knowledge. Arthur chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. He had discovered over their many interactions that she was surprisingly approachable. Unlike the fearsome reputation that preceded her, she welcomed questions and seemed to enjoy their conversations. What troubles you today? She asked. Arthur settled himself, choosing his words carefully. I've been observing something that strikes me as peculiar. Oh. In all my time here, I've only seen mages training. Endless training. He spread his hands. No mobilization to fight threats. No urgent missions. No war councils. I haven't even heard stories of recent battles from the masters. The Ancient One tilted her head. And this concerns you because from my memories of the future and everything I've read from the books, sorcerers are supposed to protect Earth from dimensional incursions and extra-dimensional entities. Arthur leaned forward slightly. So where are they? The daily operations seem focused almost exclusively on training and maintaining the sanctums. A knowing look crossed her features. Ah. You believe we're merely theoretical practitioners? Academics polishing mystical concepts with no real purpose? Not at all, Arthur replied quickly. I just expected more action, I suppose. I thought I would have gotten a chance to fight a real battle by now. Too eager to fight, aren't you, Mr. Hayes? She began walking, and Arthur fell in step beside her. The absence of visible crisis doesn't indicate absence of threat. Rather, it suggests successful prevention. With a graceful sweep of her hand, the Ancient One opened a portal, its edges crackling with golden sparks. Through it, Arthur glimpsed the nighttime skyline of New York City. Come. They stepped onto the rooftop of a tall building. The wind carried the distant hum of traffic, and the glowing city stretched endlessly in every direction. Just ahead, a familiar structure stood out, tall, stoic, and marked by its signature circular window. The New York Sanctum, Arthur said, recognizing it immediately. Indeed. The Ancient One moved closer to the edge, eyes scanning the alley beside the sanctum. Watch carefully. Arthur focused his attention on the shadows below. At first, there was nothing, just the dimly lit alley and the soft sound of a passing siren. Then he saw it. A faint shimmer in the air, like heat rising from summer pavement. It twisted unnaturally, forming a tear that widened with silent, uncanny pull. From its center, something emerged, a tendril of iridescent energy, coiling and undulating as though sniffing the air. An interdimensional entity, the Ancient One said calmly. Minor, but potentially problematic if left unchecked. A door opened in the sanctum, and a tall figure stepped out. The man moved with confident purpose, his well-groomed goatee catching the street light. A red cloak billowed behind him, moving with unnatural life. Master Drum, she identified. The current guardian of this sanctum. Master Drum raised his hands, conjuring glowing sigils that hung in the air like ancient script. The tendril recoiled, agitated, then slowly withdrew into the tear. With a sweeping motion, Drum traced a final seal, causing the rift to collapse and vanish into nothingness. The entire encounter had lasted less than 30 seconds. Arthur exhaled slowly. How often does that happen? The Ancient One tilted her head thoughtfully. Far more often than you'd imagine. Such intrusions occur around the globe daily, but thanks to the sanctums, most are handled before anyone notices. So the 3 sanctums form a mystical barrier around Earth, Arthur said, recalling his studies. And the guardians ensure that barrier stays intact. Correct, she replied. Each sanctum protects a third of Earth's metaphysical lattice. They repel incursions before they manifest fully. Most humans will never know how close their reality comes to collapse on any given day. Arthur absorbed this information, watching the now peaceful alley. The threat seemed relatively minor. Is that typical? The Ancient One's expression grew more serious. We live in a time of unusual stability. Major dimensional powers have learned to respect Earth's boundaries not out of benevolence, but practicality. You mean they fear confrontation with the Sorcerer Supreme, Arthur suggested. A slight smile played at her lips. Fear is indeed a powerful deterrent. Arthur turned to face her fully. But what about the greater threats? The entities powerful enough to challenge even the sanctums? Surely they test our defenses occasionally. That does happen, she acknowledged. Though rarely. How strong are they? Arthur pressed. What kind of power are we talking about? The Ancient One studied him with penetrating intensity. You wish to understand the true scope of what we face. I need to know what I'm preparing for. A long silence followed as she seemed to weigh his request. The wind howled across the rooftop, and the city lights twinkled like earthbound stars. Finally, she nodded once. Very well. Some lessons are best experienced firsthand, not merely described. Golden sparks cascaded from her fingertips, weaving into a complex, shimmering gateway that pulsed with unfamiliar energy. This portal felt different from the simple transportation gateways Arthur had grown accustomed to, older, more dangerous. If you wish to broaden your horizons, step through, she said. But be warned, some vistas, once seen, cannot be unseen. Some knowledge carries a weight that changes you forever. Arthur looked at the swirling portal, then back at the Ancient One. There was no hesitation in his eyes. This was precisely the kind of knowledge he craved, the kind that couldn't be found in any book or heard in any lecture. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever lay beyond. Lead the way, Sorcerer Supreme. The portal's edge crackled with energy as they approached it together. Arthur caught one last glimpse of New York's familiar skyline before stepping into the unknown. Behind them, the gateway closed with a sound like reality itself sighing in relief. Chapter 72, Gates to the Unknown. Arthur stepped through the swirling gateway and immediately stumbled. The world around him had shattered into impossible geometry. The sky fractured into lavenders bleeding into deep blues. Golden ribbons of light danced through the air like free-floating rivers. Clouds curled into spirals, never holding the same shape for more than a heartbeat. The ground beneath his feet pulsed faintly with inner light. Soft yet solid, like standing on the surface of someone's dream. Where are we? Arthur asked, turning in a slow circle. The Ancient One stood calmly beside him, watching his reaction. Tell me, Mr. Hayes. What do you think? Arthur closed his eyes, letting the strange sensations wash over him. The weightlessness. The way thoughts seemed to take shape in the corner of his vision. The overwhelming feeling of standing inside someone's sleeping mind. The dream dimension, he said finally. Very good. Arthur frowned. But I thought this was where people go when they dream. How can we be here physically? Most mortals visit only through unconscious thought. The Ancient One gestured at the surreal landscape. Their dreams are shadows, brief impressions that barely touch this realm's edges. She began walking, her feet somehow finding purchase on the impossible ground. But with sufficient skill and strength of will, one can enter directly. In the mystic arts, when you're powerful enough, very little is truly impossible. Arthur nodded slowly, absorbing this. His knowledge of realms like this was limited to brief mentions in Kamarage's texts and fragments from his past life's movies. The comics had never been his strong suit. As they began walking, though, the concept felt strange in a place that ignored gravity. Shapes formed in the distance. Wraith-like creatures drifted through the air, their bodies trailing mist and color like living paintings. Some shifted forms with each breath. Beasts became birds, became people before melting into cloud stuff. What are those? Arthur asked quietly. Dream constructs. Some are echoes of sleeping minds harmless. The Ancient One's voice remained steady. Others are native to this realm. They feed on thought and imagination. Arthur's eyes fixed on a figure with too many eyes and a mouth stretching across its chest. It watched them silently but didn't approach. He hesitated. And the ruler of this place? Isn't this dimension under? The Ancient One's hand shot up, cutting him off. Names have power here, Mr. Hayes. More than in any other realm. They echo through the dream stuff. They attract attention. Arthur felt ice in his veins. So he doesn't know we're here yet. Her eyes grew sharp, alert in a way that made Arthur's skin crawl. Not yet. But he will, and soon. When he does, our educational visit becomes something far more dangerous. She raised her hand, and the portal behind them flickered back into visibility. Its edges pulsed with urgency, like a heart beating too fast. Come. We've already lingered longer than wise. Arthur took one last look at the impossible vista at creatures made of pure imagination and landscapes that defied physics. Then he stepped back through the gateway. New York's solid reality hit him like a physical force. Concrete beneath his feet. Stars in their proper places. The reassuring hum of traffic far below. Arthur released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. That was one of the easier realms. The Ancient One actually smiled. Accessible, yes. The dream dimension lies close to human consciousness, which makes it seem welcoming. But safe is a word that has no meaning there. Arthur steadied himself against the rooftop's edge. Where to next? She studied him with those penetrating eyes. Are you certain you wish to continue? What you've seen is nothing compared to what comes next. Yes. I need to understand the full scope. Arthur replied firmly. The Ancient One nodded slowly. Very well. But remember, you insisted on this knowledge. This time, her gestures were more complex. The portal that opened beside them radiated something far worse than the dream dimension's chaotic energy. This was pure malevolence, ancient and patient and hungry. Arthur's skin crawled just looking at it. Prepare yourself, she said simply. Arthur stepped forward before he could reconsider. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, every nerve in his body screamed warnings. Cold that burned. Heat that froze. The air itself felt poisonous. Behind him, the portal vanished with a sound like screaming. The sky above was a nightmare of blood-red clouds split by jagged streaks of black lightning. The landscape sprawled in all directions, crimson cliffs that looked like exposed bone, rivers of molten metal that gave off no heat, and scattered across everything, actual bones embedded in the ground like grotesque flowers. In the distance, a scream echoed. Long, drawn out, absolutely hopeless. Arthur felt something settle on his chest, an invisible weight trying to crush not his body, but his spirit. Welcome to hell, the Ancient One said, appearing beside him. Her voice was quieter now, more solemn. One of many such realms, but among the most influential. It reshapes itself to reflect the inner darkness of those who enter. Arthur recognized this immediately as Mephisto's domain. Everything he'd read, every warning in the ancient texts, paled compared to experiencing it firsthand. The ground split open with a sound like breaking mountains. A narrow bridge of black stone stretched across a chasm that descended into fire and shadow. Beneath it, figures moved, human shapes that twisted and clawed at one another, whispering names and voices like broken glass. Are those? Arthur began. Souls, the Ancient One finished gently. Some tried to bargain with powers beyond their understanding. Others were simply unlucky. The Lord of this realm collects them all equally. Arthur felt the chill spread deeper, seeping into his bones. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. Each breath tasted of smoke and despair. The air itself pressed down on him, thick with the weight of countless broken dreams. Something inside him cracked. Whispers flooded his mind, fragments of visions he didn't want to see. Choices he hadn't made. Futures where he failed, where everyone he might one day care about suffered because he wasn't strong enough, smart enough, fast enough. The realm fed on his fears like a living thing. His knees buckled. He tried to look away, to center himself as Master Singh had taught him, but the dimension pulled at him with relentless hunger. The Ancient One's hand touched his shoulder, warm and real and grounding. Enough, she said. Reality dissolved around them in a burst of golden light. They stood once again on the familiar rooftop, New York's lights twinkling peacefully below. Arthur gasped, gripping the roof's edge as the world steadied around him. "You weren't ready for that," the Ancient One said, without judgment. "Few ever are." Arthur closed his eyes and drew a deep breath. His fingers curled into fists not in anger, but determination. He'd gotten a glimpse of Mephisto's true power. Of what the Ancient One regularly faced. The movies had never done them justice. "I want to continue," he said, his voice steadier than before. "I need to understand the full scope." The Ancient One watched him carefully, then nodded once. With fluid motion, she opened another portal, this one swirling with violet energy that pulsed like a heartbeat in the dark. It didn't radiate rage or grief. It radiated something far worse. Something utterly alien. She didn't speak this time. Arthur stepped forward, the portal's light casting deep shadows across his face. Whatever lay beyond would complete his education about the true threats facing Earth. And something told him this final lesson would be the most dangerous of all. The violet energy beckoned, promising answers to questions he wasn't sure he wanted answered. But he stepped through anyway. Chapter 73, The Dark Dimension. Arthur tumbled through the violet portal and hit ground that shouldn't exist. Purple-black energy swirled around him like living smoke. The ground beneath his feet pulsed with its own heartbeat. In the distance, impossible structures rotated through space, defying every law of physics he'd ever learned. "Welcome to the Dark Dimension," the Ancient One said, appearing beside him. Arthur's skin crawled. Arthur recognized it immediately from his foreknowledge. But seeing it in person was vastly different from memory. Everything here felt wrong, like reality had been fed through a blender and reassembled by a madman. "The beings here exist beyond time as we understand it," she continued. "They see our dimension as limited. Imperfect." As if summoned by her words, shapes emerged from the swirling darkness. Some were vaguely humanoid but stretched and distorted. Others defied description, entirely geometries that hurt to perceive directly. Arthur felt his frustration from the Mephisto realm boiling over. The helplessness. The fear. The crushing weight of realizing how small he truly was in the cosmic scheme. He needed to hit something. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the approaching entities. The Ancient One nodded slightly. "Channel your emotions productively, Mr. Hayes." That was all the permission Arthur needed. Golden energy flowed from his fingers, forming a shimmering blade of pure light. The first creature lunged, a writhing mass of shadow and too many teeth. Arthur's blade carved through it like sunlight through mist. The thing shrieked and dissolved into smoke. More came. Arthur replaced his blade with twin shields that blazed around his forearms. A spider-like entity with human hands for legs scuttled forward, striking with impossible speed. Its claws scraped against golden barriers. The sound was like nails on glass multiplied by 1,000. Arthur pushed back hard. His shield expanded outward, catching the creature's center mass and hurling it into the void. "Focus," the Ancient One called. "Control your power. Don't let it control you." Arthur took a breath. Steadied himself. The next wave approached more cautiously. He formed a dozen energy darts between his fingers and launched them with surgical precision. Each one found its mark. A massive creature charged him, living shadow wrapped around human bones like armor. Arthur constructed a spear of solid light and gripped it with both hands. They met head-on. The impact jarred his arms to the shoulder. But the spear held. Golden energy spread from the point of contact, unmaking the creature from the inside out. Arthur fought harder, channeling months of training and a lifetime of combat experience. His constructs flowed from one form to another, blades to shields to whips of crackling energy. But something was wrong. Each second here drained him. Not just his strength, but his will. His sense of who he was. "Enough," the Ancient One said. Arthur lowered his hands, gasping. His golden constructs faded to nothing. The remaining entities melted back into the darkness, apparently deciding he wasn't worth the trouble. "How do you stand it?" Arthur asked. "This place feels like it's trying to eat my soul." "Practice. And necessity." That's when Arthur felt it. Something vast beyond comprehension. Power that made Mephisto's realm feel like a gentle spring breeze. Arthur's knees buckled. His vision blurred. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his body refused to obey. It was like being crushed beneath a collapsing star. In the distance, something moved toward them. Massive. Ancient. Terrible. Arthur caught a glimpse, burning eyes larger than skyscrapers, a form that seemed made of darkness itself, and knew he was about to die. So, a voice spoke. Each word made Arthur's bones vibrate. His teeth ached. His soul cringed. The Sorcerer Supreme returns to my domain. The figure emerged fully from the swirling energies. Dormammu in all his cosmic horror, a being of pure dark magic whose very presence made reality scream in protest. Arthur might as well have been a dust mote for all the attention the entity paid him. I did not expect you so soon, Dormammu continued. His voice was thunder made of shadows. Have you come to borrow power again? The Ancient One stepped between Arthur and the cosmic being. A brief visit. Nothing more. Brief. Dormammu's laughter shook the dimension. Time has no meaning here. You know this. Arthur remained frozen. He couldn't even breathe properly under the crushing weight of Dormammu's presence. Yet you continue to steal from my realm, Dormammu said, genuine amusement in his terrible voice. Prolonging your pitiful existence. How much longer can you cling to life? How many more years will you buy with fragments of my power? Long enough, she replied calmly. We shall see. Dormammu attacked without warning. Dark energy erupted from him, not golden light like the mystic arts, but pure force that sought to unmake everything it touched. The Ancient One moved faster than Arthur had ever seen her move. Her hands wove patterns that deflected the assault. She didn't try to match Dormammu's raw power. She redirected it. Used it against itself. Turned overwhelming force into manageable streams. Arthur recognized some techniques from his memory's moves Strange had used against Thanos. But this was different. Dormammu was stronger than Thanos. More than just physically powerful. He was a fundamental force of the universe itself. And the Ancient One wasn't using the Time Stone. The battle, if you could call it that, was basically the Ancient One buying time. She wove shields and barriers. Opened portals to redirect attacks. Created mirror dimensions to confuse Dormammu's targeting. Arthur found himself defending against mere aftershocks of their conflict. Each stray bolt of dark energy that came his way required him to quickly form golden shields, the constructs straining against power that could have atomized mountains. Clever as always, Dormammu admitted, pausing his assault. But you cannot evade forever. I don't need forever, the Ancient One replied. Only long enough. Arthur saw her opportunity the moment she took it. A gap in Dormammu's attention, a split second when the cosmic entity's focus shifted. Her hands moved with desperate precision, tearing open a gateway that shouldn't have been possible. Now! She commanded. Arthur didn't hesitate. He lunged toward the portal just as the Ancient One grabbed his arm. They tumbled through together as reality folded around them. Behind them, Dormammu's roar of rage shook the very foundations of his dimension. The sound followed them through the closing gateway, a promise of future retribution. They collapsed onto the familiar rooftop in New York. Arthur's legs gave out entirely, and he found himself sitting on cold concrete, staring up at mundane stars. That was, he began, then stopped. There were no words. The Ancient One sat beside him, looking more tired than he'd ever seen her. For several minutes, neither spoke. I don't understand, Arthur finally said. How can something be that powerful? How can anyone stand against it? Dormammu is a fundamental force, she replied quietly. Like gravity or entropy. You don't defeat such things, you work around them. Arthur stared at his hands, remembering how utterly helpless he'd felt. Can I ever be strong enough to face something like that? Perhaps. In time. The Ancient One's voice carried exhaustion. But you needn't worry. As long as the sanctums stand, as long as the barriers hold, Dormammu cannot enter our dimension. Arthur nodded slowly, processing this. He did not ask about what Dormammu had said about borrowing power, about prolonging her life. He didn't care. To him, it was no different from using dark magic for good purposes. As long as magic served good ends, the source mattered less than the result. The barriers are strong? He asked instead. Stronger than you know. She stood, brushing off her robes. The Ancient One before me, and the one before her, all the way back to Agamotto himself, we've all contributed to those defenses. Arthur got to his feet, his legs still shaky. The city below went about its business, completely unaware that 3 dimensions away, a cosmic entity had just tried to unmake reality. What now? He asked. Rest, the Ancient One advised, noting his exhaustion. What you've experienced today would overwhelm most practitioners entirely. You've done remarkably well to maintain your composure. Arthur nodded gratefully and made his way back to his quarters. Once alone, he collapsed onto his meditation mat, not even attempting to reach his bed. The experiences had changed him, he realized. Not physically, but in his fundamental understanding of reality. The cosmos was vaster, more dangerous, and more complex than even his previous knowledge had suggested. Movies and comics never showed the true extent of power some beings in the Marvel world possessed. As exhaustion claimed him, one thought persisted: he needed to accelerate his preparations. He was nowhere near strong enough to face what was to come. But now, at least, he understood the scale of what he was preparing for. The real question was whether any amount of preparation would ever be enough. Chapter 74, Lessons in Humility. The echoes of Dormammu's terrible power still resonated in Arthur's mind days later, but not as trauma as motivation. Every morning, he woke with renewed purpose. The Ancient One had shown him the scale of what he needed to face. His response was simple: become stronger. His training at Kamarage transformed overnight. What had once been academic pursuit became desperate forging. Every meditation session pushed deeper into mental fortitude. Every energy manipulation exercise strained for greater output and finer control. The abstract threats had become concrete. Now he had a benchmark. Arthur arrived at the training courtyard before dawn, already warmed up and ready when other students stumbled in, rubbing sleep from their eyes. His spatial manipulation exercises had intensified, creating multiple portals simultaneously, maintaining them for extended periods, experimenting with complex geometric configurations. "You're here early," Kilius observed one morning, finding Arthur already deep in practice. "Always something more to learn," Arthur replied without looking up from the intricate mandala he was constructing. Their old rivalry felt distant now. Kilius represented a known quantity, a familiar challenge. Arthur's sights were set much higher. During sparring sessions, Arthur's newfound intensity was immediately apparent. Where he'd once fought with calculated efficiency, he now pushed himself to the absolute limits of his abilities. His spatial manipulation became more creative, more unpredictable. "Excellent adaptation," Master Ilhakpa commented after Arthur defeated another student using a technique that involved redirecting attacks through multiple mirror dimensions simultaneously. "Your progress has accelerated considerably." Arthur merely nodded, already moving on to the next exercise. Compliments meant little when he remembered how powerless he'd felt in Dormammu's presence. "You've changed, Hayes," Kilius confronted him one evening after Arthur had declined an invitation to join other students for dinner. "What happened during your absence last week?" Arthur paused in his energy manipulation practice. "I learned that I'm insignificant compared to the universe." "And that motivated you how, exactly?" "It showed me how much further I need to go." Arthur resumed his training. Kilius watched him for another moment. Something like unease flickered in his eyes before he walked away. Within weeks, Arthur was regularly sparring with the junior masters. He didn't always win. Their experience and deeper power reserves were formidable, but he forced them to adapt, to reconsider techniques they'd used for decades. "Hayes," Master Chen called after one such session. "The Ancient One would like to see you." Arthur found her in the orrery, watching the celestial bodies drift in their eternal dance. "Your instructors speak highly of your recent progress," she began without preamble. "They say you train with unprecedented dedication." "I have goals to reach," Arthur replied simply. "Indeed." She turned to study him. "And what drives this sudden urgency?" Arthur met her gaze directly. "You showed me what's out there. Now I know exactly how much stronger I need to become." A faint smile touched her lips. "And you believe this level of intensity is sustainable?" "It has to be." The Ancient One nodded slowly. "Very well. But remember, true strength comes not just from power, but from understanding." She moved closer to the swirling celestial display. "Don't lose sight of wisdom in your pursuit of capability." March arrived with winter's last bite still clinging to the Himalayan air. Arthur had almost forgotten about his MIT application, so consumed was he by mystical training. The application felt like a formality from another lifetime. Winky appeared in his chamber one morning, holding a thin envelope. "Master Hayes, a letter from the Muggle University." Arthur took it absently, breaking the seal while reviewing notes from the previous day's training session. The opening paragraph stopped him cold. "Dear Mr. Hayes, after careful consideration of your application materials, we regret to inform you that we are unable to offer you admission to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology." Arthur blinked, certain he had misread. He scanned the letter again, his mind processing each word precisely. Rejection. Unequivocal, definitive rejection. His test scores were perfect. How was this possible? He found the explanation further down. While your academic achievements and test scores are impressive, our holistic admissions process considers many factors beyond academic metrics. Our committee noted significant gaps in your application, including the absence of teacher recommendations, limited evidence of extracurricular engagement, and no documented participation in science competitions, research projects, or community initiatives. The letter slipped from his fingers. Teacher recommendations. Extracurricular activities. Community service. He'd never really known these things mattered. In his past life, MIT hadn't even been within his reach. In this life, he was so detached from the Muggle world that he didn't know anyone who could guide him through the admission process. He had assumed that perfect scores would be enough. It had been catastrophically wrong. More troubling was the realization that he had no backup plan. Convinced of his inevitable acceptance, he'd applied nowhere else. Application deadlines for comparable institutions had passed months ago. For the first time since a very long time, Arthur felt truly lost. That afternoon's training session reflected his distraction. Techniques that had become second nature suddenly failed. A portal exercise collapsed mid-formation. Basic energy shields flickered and died. Enough, Master Hamir declared after Arthur's third consecutive failure. Your mind is elsewhere, Hayes. Training in such a state is dangerous. I apologize, Master, Arthur replied stiffly. It won't happen again. As other students filed out, Arthur remained behind. Attempting to center himself through meditation. The rejection letter had shaken him more than any cosmic horror. Dormammu might threaten Earth's existence, but this very human setback had derailed his carefully constructed plans. Your energy is fragmented today. Arthur opened his eyes to find the Ancient One observing him from the doorway. A temporary distraction, he assured her. I'll regain focus by tomorrow. Will you? She entered the chamber, settling gracefully onto a cushion across from him. Or will you continue dwelling on what cannot be immediately changed? Arthur tensed. You know about the letter. That your academic ambitions have encountered an obstacle? Yes. Her expression remained serene. Such disappointments often feel insurmountable. It's not just disappointment, Arthur protested. This disrupts years of planning. Without MIT, my technological development will be significantly delayed. Perhaps. The Ancient One tilted her head slightly. Or perhaps this is an opportunity to examine whether this particular path was truly necessary. Arthur frowned. What do you mean? Consider why you believed this specific institution was essential, she continued. Then consider what you actually seek to accomplish. She paused, letting the words sink in. The answers might surprise you. The Ancient One rose smoothly. When you're ready to explore these questions, come to my study. I have a suggestion that might provide perspective. After she departed, Arthur returned to meditation. But his mind refused to settle. The emotional turbulence beneath his usual analytical clarity kept breaking through like cracks in a dam. The Ancient One's words echoed in his thoughts. Consider what you actually seek to accomplish. Why had he fixated on MIT so completely? Arthur closed his eyes, forcing himself to examine the question honestly. Was it genuine necessity, or something more superficial? Had he been drawn to be like Tony Stark? Building a tech empire, creating his own version of Jarvis, constructing advanced weapons that could stand against cosmic threats? The image was appealing, he admitted. But was that wisdom or just childhood fantasy dressed up as pragmatism? Another question surfaced, one that made him uncomfortable. Did technology really offer the best path forward, or was he trying to hedge his bets? Magic was powerful, he'd seen that firsthand. But technology felt safer somehow. More predictable. More controllable. Arthur shifted on his meditation cushion. Even if technology was crucial to his future plans, did he actually need a formal degree? He could buy books, equipment, laboratories. Learn at his own pace without the constraints of curricula or professors who knew nothing of real power. Some of history's greatest inventors had been self-taught. But then another possibility crept into his thoughts, one he didn't want to acknowledge. Had MIT represented something else entirely? A chance at the normal school life he'd never had at Hogwarts? 4 years of being just another brilliant student instead of Hayes the Hexer, The isolated muggle born in Slytherin? The thought stung because it might be true. Arthur opened his eyes and stared at the meditation chamber's ancient walls. The rejection hurt more than it should have if this was purely about education. That told him something important about his real motivations. Perhaps the Ancient One was right. Perhaps this setback was forcing him to examine assumptions he'd built his entire future around. He closed his eyes, trying to find the center that had driven him so effectively in recent weeks. Tomorrow, he would visit the Ancient One and hear her suggestion. The meditation chamber fell silent around him, but Arthur's mind churned with new possibilities he'd never allowed himself to consider. Maybe losing MIT wasn't a setback. Maybe it was liberation. Chapter 75, Through Different Eyes. Morning light filtered through ancient windows as Arthur entered the Ancient One's study. Unlike the stark functionality of most Kamarage spaces, her private chamber seemed to exist between worlds and eras. Ancient scrolls shared shelf space with modern physics texts. A traditional Tibetan altar stood opposite a chalkboard covered in quantum equations. Incense smoke curled through sunbeams, creating ephemeral patterns in the air. She gestured to a cushion opposite her own. "Your thoughts remain clouded, Mr. Hayes." Arthur settled himself, accepting the offered tea. "I'm still processing the rejection." "Are you?" She studied him over the rim of her cup. "Or are you processing what the rejection means for your carefully structured plans?" He paused, steam curling from his cup. "Both." "Tell me," she said, setting her tea down with perfect precision, "what makes MIT so essential to your development?" "Their programs in computer science and artificial intelligence are unparalleled," Arthur replied immediately. "The resources, the faculty connections." The Ancient One raised her hand, stopping him. "I've heard this explanation before. It sounds rehearsed." Arthur frowned. "It's the truth. Perhaps. But not the complete truth." She leaned forward slightly. "I suspect you're trying to accomplish too much at once, Mr. Hayes. Magic. Mystic arts. Technology." Her eyes narrowed. "All pursued simultaneously, with the intensity of someone who believes tomorrow may never come." The observation struck uncomfortably close to home. "Time is limited," he responded. "Indeed. Which is why priorities matter." Her gaze held his. "Tell me, have you actually visited MIT? Observed these unparalleled programs firsthand?" Arthur hesitated. "No." "Then you're pursuing an idea, not a reality." She rose in a single fluid motion and moved to a window. "Perhaps you should see for yourself what you believe you're missing." "And how would I do that?" A hint of amusement touched her lips. "You've mastered portals that can span continents. You possess a certain cloak that renders the wearer invisible." Arthur blinked. The solution was obvious in retrospect. "Visit," she continued. "Observe without preconception. Then determine if what they offer truly aligns with what you seek. And if it doesn't?" Arthur asked quietly. "Then you've gained wisdom through experience rather than assumption." She returned to her cushion. "Which is always more valuable?" Arthur nodded slowly. "I'll go tomorrow." "Good." She poured more tea. "Now tell me more about this idea of using magic to influence admissions officials next year." He froze, cup halfway to his lips. "How did you?" "I observe," she replied simply. "Your energy shifts when you consider manipulating circumstances to your advantage. And it is also the only possible option for someone with your background." Arthur set his cup down. "The Confondue's charm would be simple enough once my magic fully returns." "Simple, perhaps." Her voice carried no judgment. "But worthy. If MIT is truly essential to my development." "Is it?" She interrupted. "That's the question you need to answer first." The silence stretched between them. "The mystical arts require balance," she continued eventually. "Between capability and wisdom. Between what we can do and what we should do." Arthur met her gaze. "I've never claimed to be a paragon of virtue." "No," she agreed. "But you do claim to seek knowledge. True knowledge requires honest assessment, especially of oneself." Arthur finished his tea in thoughtful silence. The next morning found Arthur standing on Massachusetts Avenue, staring up at MIT's imposing main building. The spring air carried the scent of possibility, students hurrying between classes with textbooks and bulky laptops clutched against their chests. His journey had been direct. A portal from Kamarage to his London townhouse, then another to a secluded alley near campus. The invisibility cloak settled around his shoulders like liquid darkness, its ancient magic requiring no action from him to maintain. Arthur moved across campus methodically, following groups of students into buildings he recognized from his research. The computer science lab hummed with activity despite the semester winding down. In one lab, a team clustered around a robotic arm that moved with surprising fluidity for 1996 technology. The adaptive learning algorithm still needs work, a woman with tied-back hair explained to her teammates, but the motion planning is finally smooth. Professor Rodriguez says we're the first undergrad team to get accepted to SIGGRAPH in years, added another student proudly. Arthur drew closer, studying their work with growing interest. The principles were sound, but the implementation was primitive by the standards of his fragmentary future knowledge. He spent hours moving from building to building. In every classroom and lab, he found similar scenes, brilliance constrained by the limitations of 1996 technology. As Arthur sat in on classes and wandered through laboratories, a profound realization began to crystallize in his mind. This was only 1996. The cutting-edge technology here focused on bulky desktop computers, Windows 95, and the Internet boom, things Arthur had no genuine interest in. While some students worked on robotics and weapons tech, everything was painfully primitive compared to what Arthur knew was possible. The chips were low density, the hardware clunky, the software embarrassingly limited. It was simply too early. If he joined MIT now, he would gain nothing beyond a normal college experience. Without advanced chip technology and the software architecture that wouldn't exist for years, nothing he learned in classes would serve his true ambitions. He needed to wait. Perhaps 5, even 10 years before the technology would approach levels that could support his goals. In a crowded student lounge, conversations confirmed his epiphany. Did you see that announcement from Stark Industries? A student with wild curly hair looked up from his magazine. They're claiming breakthroughs in neural network applications. Typical Stark, his friend replied without looking away from her chunky laptop. All that money and the best they can imagine is smarter weapons systems. The architecture is still impressive, argued a third student. Their pattern recognition framework is years ahead of anyone else. Speaking of which, my internship interview with them is next week, said the first student. Hoping they'll let me work on the civilian applications. Sell out, the woman teased, finally looking up. What happened to your speech about open-source medical diagnostics changing the world? Arthur listened, fascinated by their casual brilliance. These were really some of the brightest minds in the world today. As evening approached, he slipped into the admissions office, finding the room with accepted student files. Opening a cabinet labeled Admitted Students, Fall 1996, he quickly scanned several folders. The profiles stunned him. One student had published 3 peer-reviewed mathematics papers before turning 17. Another had developed a new encryption algorithm while still in high school. A third had built and sold a software company. Each file told a similar story, exceptional academic achievement paired with remarkable extracurricular accomplishments. Many had recommendation letters from school teachers, industry pioneers, and renowned professors. Arthur closed the cabinet with uncharacteristic carelessness. His perfect test scores represented merely the baseline for consideration. The truly distinguishing factors lay in areas he had completely neglected. Later, as darkness fell across the campus, Arthur walked alone through Kilian Court. Students passed him, invisible as he was, discussing projects, theories, and weekend plans with animated gestures. Arthur watched them with a sad smile. For all their brilliance and potential, he could foresee their futures with sobering clarity. How many would be recruited by shadowy government agencies? How many would design weapons for military contractors? How many would end up working for Stark Industries or Oscorp, their innovations claimed by corporate giants? The Marvel world was inherently dangerous for brilliant minds. Without power or protection, they became targets or tools. Their revolutionary ideas would be weaponized, classified, or buried to maintain the status quo. These students were genuinely brilliant. But in this world, brilliance wasn't enough. The big conglomerates and evil organizations would consume them. Without powerful backers, there was little hope for truly independent success. It was a somber realization. But it also clarified Arthur's own path. Perhaps MIT wasn't what he needed after all, at least not yet. Arthur returned to Kamarage the following evening, stepping directly from Cambridge through a portal into the familiar courtyard. The Ancient One found him in the meditation garden, his expression more peaceful than she'd seen in weeks. Your journey was illuminating, Mr. Hayes. She asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Yes, Arthur admitted. I was chasing the wrong goal at the wrong time. And this realization brings you peace. It brings me clarity. Arthur nodded. The technology I seek to master is still years from existing. The students are remarkable, but they're working with tools that will be obsolete before they graduate. So your path shifts. It simplifies. Arthur smiled slightly. Focus on what's immediately useful. Master the mystic arts. Recover my magical abilities. When technology catches up to what I need, then I'll pursue it. The Ancient One nodded, satisfaction visible in her serene expression. A path with wisdom, not just ambition. They discussed his training schedule for the coming months. With MIT no longer his immediate goal, Arthur could devote himself fully to his mystical studies and magical recovery. Remember, Mr. Hayes, the Ancient One said as she turned to leave, true mastery comes not from dividing one's attention, but from complete presence in the moment. Later that evening, Arthur returned to his quarters. The past 2 days had shifted something fundamental in his outlook. He'd been trying to run before he could walk, spreading himself too thin across disciplines that each required full dedication. He settled onto his meditation cushion, centering himself with practiced ease. The routine felt different, somehow lighter, less burdened by urgency. As he slipped into the meditative state, something stirred within him. A sensation both unfamiliar and intimately known. A warmth spreading through pathways long dormant. Arthur's eyes snapped open. His hand reached out instinctively, fingers extended toward the small candle on his desk. Incendio, he whispered. The wick burst into flame. Chapter 76, Magical Renaissance. Arthur stared at the flickering candle flame, his heart racing. But as the initial euphoria faded, his analytical mind took over. Why now? What made him able to cast magic again? What had changed? He examined the question methodically. The learnings from his trip to MIT, clarity about his future path, the lessened burden and the mental relief that came with it should have helped, but that couldn't be the full answer. That would not make sense. The problem had never been mental. It was structural. The exposure to the space stone had fundamentally altered and strengthened his magic core, making it too powerful for his normal magical channels. Mental relief alone couldn't fix that kind of physical mismatch. The only logical explanation was that over the past 9 months, multiple factors had worked together to solve the problem. First, his body had undergone fundamental changes. Normal growth, certainly he was still developing at 19. But more importantly, the daily physical training and sparring at Kamarage had strengthened him in ways he hadn't fully appreciated. Second, his magical channels had grown more robust. Every day, he'd channeled dimensional energy through those same pathways while practicing the mystic arts. The constant flow had acted like exercise for his magical infrastructure, gradually strengthening and expanding them. Finally, the daily meditation had refined his control. The disciplined focus required for mystical spells had honed his will to a razor's edge. All of it had combined to fix the fundamental problem. His channels were finally strong enough to handle his transformed magic, or maybe some of it. Today's burden lifting had simply removed the last psychological barrier. The magic had been ready for weeks, he'd just been too focused on other pursuits to notice or try. Arthur grinned at the candle flame. Time for a proper testing. Without hesitation, he opened a portal to his London manor. The familiar golden circle appeared with effortless precision, its edges stable and bright. Winky! He called as he stepped through. The house elf appeared instantly, her eyes widening at his obvious excitement. Master Hayes looks very happy, she exclaimed, bouncing on her toes. I am indeed. Come, let's go to the training room. I need to test something important. Arthur led her down to the underground training room he'd constructed years ago. The space remained exactly as he'd left it, reinforced walls, practice dummies, protective charms still holding strong. Left unused for more than a year. He raised his index finger and concentrated. Lumos. Brilliant white light erupted from his fingertip. Arthur felt the familiar tingle of magic flowing through him, warm and responsive. Next, he focused on a wooden practice dummy across the room. Wingardium Leviosa. The dummy rose smoothly into the air, floating with perfect stability. Arthur guided it through a series of complex maneuvers, his control as precise as ever. Incendio. Fire bloomed at his fingertips. Oxio sword. The blade flew into his waiting hand with satisfying speed. Winky clapped her hands with delight. Master's magic is back. Winky is so happy. Arthur tested spell after spell, working his way through his repertoire. Everything up to 4th year level worked perfectly. His execution felt smooth and natural, exactly as it should. Then he attempted something more advanced. Protego Maxima. The shield charm began to form, golden light gathering around him then flickered and died. Arthur frowned, trying again with other similar spells, but ended with the same result. 5th year spells remained beyond his reach. His channels had strengthened and his control had grown considerably, but not enough for his full capabilities. The realization dampened his enthusiasm slightly, but only slightly. Progress was progress. Much better than having no magic at all. Arthur retrieved his old wand from a locked cabinet. The familiar elder wood with thestral hair core felt strange in his grip after months of mystical gestures. When he'd last tried using it, the wand had felt like nothing more than an ordinary stick. Now it hummed with responsive magic. Arthur suspected that with the added control of using a wand, he should be able to cast more complex spells. Lumos Maxima. The room blazed with silver-white light, far brighter than his wandless attempt. The wand definitely amplified his abilities, as it should. Arthur worked through increasingly complex spells. Everything up to newt level functioned properly, though not quite at full strength. The wand recognized him as its master, but their connection felt muted somehow. Not surprising. The Space Stone's transformation had altered his magical signature. His wand was still his, but no longer a perfect match. He'd need to commission a new one eventually. But for now, this would suffice. Next came the test he was most excited about. Winky, Arthur called, setting the wand aside. I need you to watch carefully. If anything goes wrong, call for help immediately. The house elf nodded seriously, though she looked puzzled. Arthur closed his eyes, focusing on the familiar sensation of apparition. He visualized a spot 10 feet away, near the far wall. Crack. The sound was subtle, almost gentle. Arthur opened his eyes to find himself exactly where he'd intended, with none of the usual disorientation that accompanied apparition. No nauseating compression. No feeling of being squeezed through a tube. The transition had been smooth as silk, even smoother than house elf transportation. He tested a few long-distance apparitions with the same remarkable experience. Fascinating, Arthur murmured. His space stone exposure had clearly affected more than just his mystical arts. All spatial magic came easier now. Emboldened, Arthur decided to test something more ambitious. He pictured a clearing in the Forbidden Forest, a spot he'd visited several times during his Hogwarts years. Crack. He appeared among ancient trees, filtered light dancing through the heavy canopy. The Forbidden Forest stretched around him in all directions, exactly as he remembered. More importantly, he'd just operated through Hogwarts' legendary wards without any difficulty whatsoever. Arthur spent several minutes testing the limits of his enhanced apparition, jumping from clearing to clearing with increasing distance and complexity. Each transition remained effortless. Satisfied, he returned to his manners training room. Master Hayes is amazing! Winky exclaimed as he reappeared. Winky has never seen anyone apparate so smoothly. Arthur grinned. Thank you, Winky. Now I want to try one more thing. He raised his hands, focusing on both magical and mystical energies simultaneously. Complex spells and constructs needed the use of both hands, so he couldn't use them together effectively. But then he cast a one-handed shield spell while using his other hand to cast Incendio at a dummy. It worked flawlessly. There was nothing wrong with the combination. He'd worried there might be conflicts, but both energies seemed complementary rather than opposing. Arthur attempted to levitate himself using Magic Voldemort's signature spell. His feet remained stubbornly planted on the ground. That level of magic was still beyond his current capabilities. He wanted to be like Doctor Strange, floating with his cloak while casting spells, but that wasn't possible yet. Disappointing, but not crushing since he would eventually reach that level. However, as Arthur tried more mystical spells and constructs, he discovered something that excited him even more. Everything felt easier. Much easier than his earlier attempts. Energy flowed through his fingers like water finding its level. Constructs that had required intense concentration now appeared with casual thought. Whether it was the mental clarity from resolving his MIT crisis, his magic returning to complement his mystical training, or something else entirely, his full potential seemed to have unlocked. No more being averagely talented at everything except spatial spells. Kilius would be in for quite a shock. Arthur returned to Kamarage through another portal, his mood brighter than it had been in months. Being rejected by MIT had been completely forgotten. If anything, it felt like liberation. He had his magic back, at least partially. His mystical training was advancing rapidly. His goals were clearer now, unburdened by unrealistic timelines. And if he really wanted to attend university in the future, well, the confrontation's charm would be available to him soon enough. But that felt like a problem for another day. Tonight, Arthur Hayes had his magic back. Tomorrow, he would throw himself into advanced mystical study with renewed vigor. He settled onto his meditation cushion with profound satisfaction. The universe was vast and dangerous, filled with cosmic threats beyond imagination. But he no longer felt hopeless about the future. Arthur closed his eyes and began to meditate, golden sparks dancing around his fingers as both magical and mystical energies flowed through him in perfect harmony. The real training could finally begin. Chapter 77, A Call for Help. Dawn light streamed through the ancient windows of Kamarage as Arthur completed his morning meditation. The familiar routine felt different now, enhanced by the steady hum of magic flowing beneath his skin. After an hour of mystical exercises, he sought out the Ancient One in her study. "Sorcerer Supreme," he said, offering a respectful bow. She looked up from a scroll covered in Sanskrit text. "Mr. Hayes. You seem lighter today." "I wanted to thank you," Arthur said, settling into the chair she indicated. "Your suggestion about visiting MIT was exactly what I needed." "And have you cleared your doubts about your path forward?" Arthur nodded. "It's not time to learn technology yet. I'll pursue that in a few years when the field has advanced further. For now, I'm going to focus entirely on mastering the mystic arts." The Ancient One studied his face carefully. "Your expression shows that whatever worries plagued you have indeed vanished. But I sense something else has changed as well." She leaned forward slightly. "You look too happy and relaxed for someone who simply resolved an academic dilemma." Arthur smiled. "As an added benefit of the trip, I got my magic back." He raised his index finger. Lumos. Brilliant white light erupted from his fingertip, steady and controlled. The Ancient One's eyebrows rose slightly. "Congratulations, Mr. Hayes. That is indeed significant progress." "Thank you." Arthur let the light fade. "This raises an interesting question," she continued. "Will you now concentrate on recovering your magical abilities first, or maintain your focus on the mystic arts?" Arthur considered this. "I'll train with magic in my free time. The main focus will remain on mystic arts." The Ancient One nodded without agreeing or disagreeing, her expression neutral. "Now," she said, setting aside her scroll, "I believe you have training to attend to, and I'm curious to see how your renewed focus affects your progress." Arthur took this as his cue to leave, offering a final bow before departing. The training hall buzzed with focused energy as Master Hakpa addressed the advanced students. "Today we perfect the Eldritch Whip," he announced, his hands already glowing with golden energy. "You've all been practicing this construct for weeks. Now we refine your technique." Around the room, students raised their hands and began forming their whips. Most managed stable constructs of 3 to 4 feet. The more advanced students produced 6-foot whips with reasonable control. Kilius formed an 8-foot whip that crackled with impressive power. Arthur raised his hands and felt the energy respond like an extension of his will. The whip that materialized was 12 feet long, perfectly stable, and moved with fluid precision. The room fell silent. "Extraordinary, Mr. Hayes," Master Hakpa said, clearly shocked. "That surpasses even advanced practitioners." Kilius stared at Arthur's creation with undisguised shock. His own whip flickered and died as his concentration broke. That display was just the beginning. Over the following days, Arthur's accelerated progress became impossible to ignore. Shield spells he'd struggled with for weeks suddenly came easily. Duplication techniques that had required intense concentration now flowed from him effortlessly. In sparring sessions, the gap between Arthur and his peers became a chasm. Where once he'd relied primarily on spatial manipulation to win, now he wielded the full arsenal of mystical arts with devastating efficiency. Again, Master Chen commanded after Arthur had defeated another advanced student in under 30 seconds. This time, his opponent lasted nearly a minute before Arthur's perfectly executed binding spell ended the match. Kilius watched from the sidelines, his jaw tight with frustration. Their old rivalry had become a memory. Arthur was simply operating on a different level now. Time passed in a blur of intensive study. By June, Arthur was training directly with the masters and spending long hours in the library. He now learned many things on his own, only approaching masters when he had doubts or needed sparring partners. His magical abilities were progressing as well. He could now perform owl-level spells wandlessly, and his connection to both forms of power felt increasingly natural. One afternoon, as Arthur studied a particularly complex tome on transmutation theory in the library's quiet corner, a familiar pop interrupted his concentration. "Master Hayes!" Winky squeaked, appearing beside his reading table. She wrung her tiny hands nervously. "Winky is so sorry to be interrupting Master's important training, but Dobby wants to speak with you." Arthur looked up. Dobby, Harry Potter's house elf, if his advice had been taken. But why would Dobby want to speak with him? He'd paid little attention to the wizarding world lately. "I'm curious now," Arthur said. "Bring him here." "No, bring him to the manor. I'll be there shortly." Winky nodded and vanished. Arthur properly shelved the tome and, with a soft crack, apparat to his London manor. In the main sitting room, he found Winky and Dobby waiting. The house elf looked the same as Arthur remembered, but his eyes were filled with worry and his tea towel was twisted into knots. "Wizard Hayes!" Dobby exclaimed as Arthur appeared. "Dobby is happy you are seeing Dobby." "Harry Potter said Wizard Hayes is a good wizard." "Harry Potter!" "Calm down, Dobby," Arthur interrupted gently. "What's happened? And why come to me?" "It is Harry Potter, sir." Dobby wailed. "Harry Potter is in danger. Terrible, terrible danger. He had a dream, sir. He saw his godfather, Sirius Black, being tortured by the bad man." Arthur's understanding crystallized immediately. The Department of Mysteries. The fake dream. Dumbledore's army and a few of Harry's friends going to save Sirius. The canon had unknowingly reached the DOM incident. Arthur knew everything but decided to go through the motions to ensure everything had happened according to canon. "Is Black really captured by Voldemort?" Arthur asked. Both house elves flinched. Dobby replied, "Dobby does not know. Harry Potter tried contacting him but could not. Dobby tried visiting the Black House, but the bad elf Creaker did not allow Dobby to go inside. Dobby does not know if Godfather is safe." Arthur wasn't surprised how Bellatrix and Narcissa had ensured all routes were blocked, or how much Creaker's hatred of Sirius contributed. "So where is Harry?" Arthur asked. "Harry Potter has gone, sir." Dobby confirmed, tears welling. "He and his Wheezy and Miss Grangey and some others. They are going to save Godfather. But Dobby is fearing for Harry Potter." Arthur nodded slowly. Canon was indeed playing out. "You said you came to me. Harry didn't send you." "No, sir," Dobby admitted. "Harry Potter is not knowing Dobby is here." "But Dobby..." Dobby remembered Mr. Hayes. You were powerful, sir. Harry Potter said so many times. And Winky is always saying how much more powerful Master Hayes has become. Please help Harry Potter." Arthur didn't answer immediately. This was the moment Sirius would die falling through the veil as a result of Bellatrix's curse. Harry would lose his godfather, his only real family connection. But this was also an opportunity. Arthur could save Sirius without disrupting the larger timeline. The man didn't deserve to die, and Harry would need supportive family in the dark times ahead. Arthur turned to Winky. "What do you think, Winky? Should I help Harry Potter?" Arthur left the decision to Winky. Small steps to build confidence in the elf and ensure Winky would truly become his assistant in the future, not a servant. "Winky does not know. It will be too dangerous," Winky said hesitantly. "What if," Arthur said carefully, "if I don't go, nothing will happen to Harry, but Harry's godfather will die." "What? Godfather will die?" "No!" Dobby exclaimed. "Harry Potter loves his godfather. His only family. He will be so sad." Winky, seeing Dobby's distress, asked, "Will it be dangerous for Master?" Arthur was happy Winky asked this. It felt warm, her concern for his safety. "No. I won't be fighting. Just protecting the lives of Harry and his godfather." "Then please save Harry Potter and Mr. Black, Master," Winky said with quiet resolve. Arthur smiled. "Okay. I believe they went to the Ministry, right, Dobby?" "Yes, Wizard Hayes." Thank you for helping. You two stay here, Arthur instructed, moving toward one of his storage lockers. I'll go and ensure everyone survives tonight. He retrieved the invisibility cloak, its familiar weight settling around his shoulders. Tonight would require stealth above all else. With a soft crack, Arthur apparated away, leaving behind two nervous house elves. The Department of Mysteries awaited, and with it, a chance to change one small piece of Harry Potter's tragic story. Time to save a dog. Chapter 78, The Department of Mysteries. Arthur's boots clicked against wet pavement as he materialized in a narrow London alley. The familiar weight of the invisibility cloak settled around his shoulders as he stepped onto Whitehall's bustling evening sidewalk. Even with the many means of transportation he had mastered, he couldn't travel to any place he lacked a clear image of or had never visited. He would have to go the normal way. That's right. He had never actually visited the Ministry of Magic in all these years. There was never any real need to. Thankfully, he knew how to get inside. Arthur walked purposefully down the street, scanning for the landmark he sought. Between a grand government building and a small cafe, he spotted an out-of-order phone booth that looked distinctly shabby compared to its surroundings. The red booth stood exactly where the books had described. Arthur slipped inside, noting how cramped the space felt even for one person. He lifted the receiver and dialed 6-2-4-4-2, each number echoing with metallic clicks. "Welcome to the Ministry of Magic," announced a cool female voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Please state your name and business." Arthur considered his options. Giving his real name would be monumentally stupid. "Merlin," he said with a straight face. "Visiting the Department of Mysteries." Silence. Then, "Thank you. Visitor, please take the badge and attach it to your robes." A silver badge clattered into the coin return. Arthur examined it with growing disbelief. The words shimmered across its surface: "Merlin, Visitor, Department of Mysteries." Seriously? He pinned it to his chest. "I could have said Dark Lord Bob and they'd print me a badge." The booth lurched downward. Arthur watched through the glass as they dropped past basement levels and sub-basements, deeper into London's underground than should have been possible. Finally, the booth shuddered to a stop. "The Ministry of Magic wishes you a pleasant evening," the voice announced. The door opened onto the Ministry's atrium. Arthur stepped out and immediately felt something was wrong. The vast space stretched before him: black granite walls, peacock blue ceiling, golden fountain at the center. But it was completely empty. No security guards of any kind. No aurors patrolling the perimeter. No workers hurrying between the flow network fireplaces that lined the walls like silent sentinels. Arthur moved carefully across the polished floor, still concealed beneath the invisibility cloak. This was far too suspicious. How had Death Eaters simply walked into one of Magical Britain's most secure locations? How much inside help did they have that the entire place was empty and no one from the light side or legitimate Ministry officials knew? It said a lot about the Ministry and how thoroughly corrupt it had become. Infested with dark wizards and their sympathizers. Arthur approached the lifts and pressed the call button. This was why he wasn't using the mirror dimension for stealth. Though excellent for moving around unseen, it had significant limitations. You couldn't interact with physical objects from that parallel realm: no opening doors, no operating lifts, no turning handles. He would have to constantly shift in and out of the dimension, which was too much of a hassle and ruined any stealth advantage. The lift arrived with a cheerful ding. Arthur stepped inside and pressed the button for level 9. The lift descended with mechanical efficiency, its cheerful voice a jarring contrast to the ominous atmosphere. "Level 9, Department of Mysteries." The doors opened onto a corridor that felt wrong. Not just empty, hungry. The black stone walls seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. At the corridor's end waited a plain black door. Arthur approached it like one might approach a sleeping dragon. The handle turned easily. Too easily. The door swung open to reveal a circular chamber lined with identical black doors. No markings, no signs, nothing to distinguish them. The infamous rotating room designed to confuse intruders and probably a few employees who'd had one too many at lunch. "Right then," Arthur said. "Systematic approach." The first door revealed floating brains. Dozens of them, suspended in tanks of luminescent green fluid. They pulsed with their own rhythm, like exposed thoughts dreaming of escape. Broken glass littered the floor. Someone had already been here. Recently. Arthur's pace quickened. The second door opened onto another damaged chamber. Scorch marks decorated the walls in artistic patterns. He moved on. The third door made him stop dead. The room beyond was filled with towering shelves, each lined with hundreds of small, spinning objects that caught the light like captured time itself. Time turners. Arthur stepped inside, marveling at the sheer quantity. Dozens of shelves, each holding hundreds of the precious devices. Again, there were signs of battle. Some shelves had been knocked over, glass orbs scattered across the floor. But Arthur didn't leave in a hurry this time. The time turners were too attractive to ignore. He'd always been afraid to pursue time magic, knowing how easily it could have disastrous consequences. But these could prove invaluable in the future, and he could practice under the Ancient One's guidance. With her experience in time magic, he wouldn't have to fear catastrophic mistakes. The Death Eaters are already taking the blame, he reasoned, selecting 5 devices from the debris. What's a few more? The time turners disappeared into his robes just as footsteps echoed from the main corridor. Running footsteps. Many of them. Arthur slipped back into the circular chamber as the Order of the Phoenix burst through the entrance. Sirius Black led the charge, his aristocratic features twisted with desperate fury. Move faster! Sirius roared. Every second counts. Sirius, wait! Remus tried to grab his friend's arm. No waiting, Moony. Sirius shook him off. Harry's in there. If those bastards touch one hair on his head. We need a plan, someone started. My plan is to hex first and ask questions when they're screaming. Sirius was already moving toward a specific door. Coming. Mad Eye Moody's magical eye swiveled constantly. Constant vigilance. Could be a trap. Everything's a trap with you, Moody, Sirius shot back, but his grin held no humor. Sometimes you just have to spring it. They charged through the door. Arthur followed, grateful he'd arrived in time. The Veil Room opened before them like a Roman amphitheater designed by someone with a death fetish. Stone seats descended toward a raised dais where an ancient archway stood, its tattered black curtain rippling without wind. Whispers leaked from beyond the veil. The voices of the dead, calling to anyone foolish enough to listen. But Arthur barely noticed the veil. His attention locked onto the battle already raging below. Death Eaters and teenagers. Killing curses and desperate shields. Green light and terrified screams. Harry Potter and his friends were fighting for their lives. The Order's arrival changed everything. Finally. Sirius laughed as he dove into combat. A proper fight. Spells erupted like fireworks. The chamber became a deadly light show, green death racing toward red stunners, silver shields blooming against purple flames. Arthur watched a stray killing curse pass through the space where his head would have been. Time for a tactical adjustment. He waved his hands in practiced motions. Reality cracked like broken glass. The mirror dimension enveloped him. Arthur removed the invisibility cloak, no longer needing its protection. From this parallel space, he could observe without dodging crossfire. The perfect spectator seat for magical warfare. And what a show it was! Sirius dueled like a man reborn, his face alight with savage joy. Each near miss with a killing curse only made him laugh harder. He moved through combat like a dancer who'd learned his steps in Azkaban. Is that the best you've got? He taunted, deflecting a bone-breaking curse. My mother hit harder than that. Remus fought with controlled fury, the wolf lurking behind every precise movement. Where Sirius was chaos, Remus was calculated destruction. Mad Eye Moody simply was. His regular eye focused on his current opponent while the magical one tracked 3 others. His wand never stopped moving, creating a defensive web that seemed impossible to penetrate. Despite being outnumbered, despite facing opponents who used unforgivables like punctuation, the Order was winning. Then Arthur spotted her. Bellatrix Lestrange fought her way across the chamber with manic glee, her wild hair flying as she cackled with each curse she cast. Her target was clear, she was moving toward Sirius with single-minded determination. Sirius noticed his deranged cousin advancing on him and grinned with anticipation. Bella! Sirius called out, abandoning his duel with Lucius. Finally! I was starting to think you didn't care. Little baby black, Bellatrix sang, her voice pitched to carry over the combat. Come to play with the grown UPS. Grown UPS. Sirius barked a laugh. You still look like you raided a makeup cabinet and got lost. Bellatrix's face twisted with fury at the insult, her pale features contorting into something inhuman. The cousins began to circle each other, their hatred transcending the larger battle around them. Arthur stood up in the mirror dimension, his muscles tensing. The moment he had come to prevent was here. Everything depended on what happened in the next few seconds. Chapter 79, Behind the Veil. The battle between Sirius and Bellatrix erupted with vicious intensity. Bellatrix's first curse exploded against the stone floor where Sirius had stood a heartbeat before. Too slow, cousin. Sirius taunted, rolling to his feet with predatory grace. Azkaban made you sloppy. Filthy blood traitor. Green light erupted from Bellatrix's wand. Sirius twisted aside, the killing curse missing by inches. His return volley of vicious purple flame forced her to dive behind a fallen column. Arthur watched from the mirror dimension, positioned close enough to see the sweat on Sirius's face. The cousins' dance of death carried them steadily toward the ancient archway. Almost time. Suddenly, the fighting throughout the rest of the chamber stopped as if frozen in time. Arthur glanced toward the doorway to see what had caused this dramatic shift. An old man with a magnificent beard and colorful robes stood in the entrance, his presence commanding immediate attention. Dumbledore had arrived, and he was furious. Arthur had never seen such cold rage on the headmaster's face. His wand moved with precise, devastating efficiency, dropping Death Eaters one after another without them offering any resistance. The sheer terror in their eyes prevented them from mounting any defense. However, while the larger battle had essentially ended, one duel continued with unabated ferocity. Sirius and Bellatrix, lost in their personal war, seemed oblivious to Dumbledore's arrival. Arthur positioned himself mere inches from the combatants, watching as Sirius ducked beneath a scarlet curse that sizzled past his ear. "Come on, you can do better than that!" Sirius shouted, his voice echoing through the chamber as he laughed at his successful evasion. Arthur tensed, knowing exactly what came next. Bellatrix's second spell, the one that would strike Sirius squarely in the chest and send him tumbling through the veil. It happened precisely as Arthur remembered from his knowledge of canon events. Bellatrix raised her wand with murderous intent, the spell already forming at its tip. In that crucial moment, Arthur acted. He burst from the mirror dimension into reality while invisible using the disillusionment charm. Scarlet light erupted from Bellatrix's wand. The curse streaked toward Sirius's chest with deadly precision. Arthur's hands moved in a practiced gesture. Reality cracked around Sirius like shattered glass, yanking him into the mirror dimension just as the curse passed through where his body had been. The transition happened so quickly that to any observer, it would appear that Bellatrix's spell had struck home, sending Sirius falling backward toward the archway. In the mirror dimension, Sirius stumbled, completely disoriented. "What the bloody," he started. Arthur's stunning spell cut him off mid-profanity. The unconscious wizard slumped in his grip. "Sorry about this," Arthur muttered, opening a portal to his London manor. "But you'll thank me later." "Probably. Maybe. Actually, you'll probably try to hex me." He shoved Sirius through the glowing doorway and sealed it behind him. Rescue complete. Time for entertainment. Arthur conjured a comfortable chair and a bowl of popcorn, settling in to watch the show. The butter-scented kernels were perfectly salted. The benefits of mystical food creation always exactly to taste. In the real world, chaos erupted. "Sirius!" Harry's anguished scream tore through the chamber like a physical blow. "Sirius!" Lupin grabbed Harry, preventing him from rushing toward the veil. "There's nothing you can do, Harry. Get him, save him, he's only just gone through." Harry struggled violently against Lupin's grip. "It's too late, Harry," Lupin said, his voice breaking with grief. "We can still reach him," Harry fought desperately. "There's nothing you can do, Harry, nothing. He's gone." Arthur munched his popcorn with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Harry believed Sirius was dead, which meant the next sequence of events would unfold exactly as they should. The battle's aftermath played out around them. Dumbledore had corralled most of the remaining Death Eaters in the chamber's center, binding them with invisible magical restraints. Mad Eye Moody crawled across the floor to where Tonks lay unconscious, attempting to revive her. Behind the stone dais, flashes of light and sounds of combat continued. Kingsley had moved to engage Bellatrix after Sirius's apparent death. Harry stood frozen, lost in shock and grief, while Neville and Lupin positioned themselves protectively nearby. Then bang! Kingsley cried out in pain as he hit the ground hard. Bellatrix wheeled around, her wild hair flying as she spotted Dumbledore advancing on her position. She was fleeing. Dumbledore's wand whipped up, a spell streaking toward her retreating form. Bellatrix deflected it with desperate skill and continued her escape. "Harry, no!" Lupin shouted, but Harry had already torn free from the professor's loosened grip. She killed Sirius. Harry bellowed, his voice raw with fury and anguish. She killed him, I'll kill her. He scrambled up the stone steps like a man possessed. Multiple voices called warnings, but Harry heard none of them. This should be good, Arthur murmured, following through the mirror dimension. The chase was almost comical, Harry sprinting with teenage fury while Bellatrix fled with the desperation of someone who'd just realized they'd done evil in front of Dumbledore. Through corridors and past abandoned offices they ran. Harry's helpful door opening and lift operating made Arthur's spectating in the mirror dimension remarkably convenient. Finally, they burst into the atrium. Bellatrix stood at the center, panting like a cornered animal. Harry faced her across the polished floor, his entire body trembling with rage. Come out to play, baby Potter. Bellatrix's voice dripped false sweetness. Want to join your dog father? Don't you dare! Harry's wand shook in his grip. Don't you dare talk about him. Ah, did I hurt baby's feelings? She twirled her wand mockingly. Going to cry? Going to? Crucio. The curse erupted from Harry with all the force of his grief and hatred. Bellatrix screamed and collapsed. For about 3 seconds. Then she was back on her feet, laughing harder than ever. That tickled. She cackled. Is that really the best you can do? Let Auntie Bella teach you how it's done. Arthur leaned forward in his conjured chair. Things were getting interesting again. You have to mean it, boy. Bellatrix circled him like a shark. You have to want to cause pain to enjoy it. Righteous anger won't hurt me for long. Harry dove behind the golden fountain as her curses shattered the floor where he'd stood. Potter, you cannot win against me. Bellatrix's voice had gained an edge of desperation. I was trained by the Dark Lord himself. Give me the prophecy, roll it out toward me now and I may spare your life. The prophecy's gone. Harry shouted back. Smashed to pieces. Your master won't be happy about that, will he? Liar. Terror crept into Bellatrix's shriek. Arthur could practically see her imagining Voldemort's reaction to this news. Give it to me. Give me the prophecy. Nothing to give. Harry called from behind a golden centaur. It's destroyed. Tell Voldemort he wasted his time. Tell me yourself, Potter. The temperature plummeted. Arthur watched with more excitement. Voldemort had arrived. Chapter 80, Dark Lord Showtime. The Dark Lord Voldemort stood in the Ministry atrium like death given form. Arthur nearly dropped his popcorn. So that's him. Red eyes gleamed like fresh wounds in a face that, well, calling it a face was generous. Where a nose should have been, 2 slits opened directly into his skull. Seriously? Arthur thought, munching a kernel. All that power and he couldn't conjure himself a nose? Even a silver one like Wormtail's hand? The most feared wizard in Britain looked like a snake that had tried to become human and given up halfway through. While Arthur was having his fun, things were heating up more in the real world. So, Voldemort hissed, his voice carrying all the warmth of an open grave. You destroyed my prophecy. Bellatrix threw herself at his feet with embarrassing enthusiasm. Master, forgive me. I tried. Silence. One word. Bellatrix's mouth snapped shut so fast Arthur heard her teeth click. Voldemort's attention remained fixed on Harry. You have interfered with my plans for the last time, Potter. Arthur gripped his popcorn bowl tighter. Here it comes. Avada Kedavra. Green light erupted from Voldemort's wand, but before it could reach Harry, the golden statue of a wizard sprang to life, leaping between them. The killing curse shattered harmlessly, sending emerald sparks cascading across marble. What? Voldemort actually sounded surprised. Well, came a calm voice from the atrium's entrance. Good evening, Tom. Arthur nearly choked on his popcorn. The headmaster stood calmly in front of the golden gates, looking magnificently unimpressed by the Dark Lord's dramatic entrance. Dumbledore. Voldemort's hiss could have stripped paint. It was foolish to come here tonight, Tom. Dumbledore strolled forward as if discussing the weather. The Aurors are on their way. By which time I shall be gone, and you dead. Spat Voldemort. What happened next redefined Arthur's understanding of magical combat. Voldemort moved like liquid shadow, curses flowing from his wand in an endless stream of death. Not just killing curses spells Arthur had never seen, magic that warped the air itself. Dumbledore responded with power that seemed almost casual. Water erupted from the fountain, rising in a crystalline serpent that wrapped around Voldemort. The Dark Lord vanished, reappearing behind Dumbledore only to face a shield of golden fire shaped like a phoenix. "This is incredible," Arthur breathed, conjuring himself a proper armchair. The popcorn deserved comfortable seating for a show like this. The duels he had fought in his time at Hogwarts was nothing compared to this. The statues around the fountain came alive under Dumbledore's will. The witch and wizard protected Harry while the centaur charged Bellatrix with bronze hooves. The house elf and goblin statues joined the fray, moving with surprising grace for metal constructs. All while the two greatest wizards of their generation traded spells that could level buildings. Voldemort vanished and reappeared, sending killing curses from impossible angles. Dumbledore countered each one with shields of silver light or protective constructs that defied physics. "You cannot win, old man!" Voldemort roared, his composure finally cracking. "This was never about winning, Tom," Dumbledore replied, his voice carrying clearly across the chaos. "It was about teaching." Arthur watched in awe as Dumbledore trapped Voldemort in a sphere of water that gleamed like molten glass. For a moment, it seemed the duel was over. Then Voldemort vanished entirely, and the water crashed back into its pool. "Master!" Bellatrix screamed. Harry, thinking it was over, and Voldemort had decided to flee, made to run out from behind his statue guard, but Dumbledore bellowed, "Stay where you are, Harry." For the first time, Dumbledore sounded frightened. Harry could not see why. The atrium fell silent. Too silent. Then Harry convulsed, clutching his scar as his face contorted in agony. What was happening was new to Arthur. It was a painful reminder that there was still much magic he didn't understand. But one thing he did recognize: the magic at work was possession. Voldemort was trying to take control of Harry directly. For several terrifying moments, Harry writhed on the floor while Voldemort's voice spoke through his lips, "Kill me now, Dumbledore. If death is nothing, kill the boy." Arthur considered intervening. One push, just one careful application of mystic force, and he could eject Voldemort's soul from Harry's body. Send it into astral form where it would be vulnerable. Maybe even destroy the Horcrux in Harry's scar while he was at it. But he stopped himself. That Horcrux was Harry's extra life. His get-out-of-death-free card in the final confrontation with Voldemort. Remove it now, and Harry became just another mortal facing the most dangerous dark wizard in history. Arthur forced his hand down. "Stick to the script. Some things need to happen." The possession intensified. Harry writhed on the marble floor, Voldemort's words spilling from his lips like poison. "You've lost, old man. Kill us both. The boy is weak." Then something shifted. Harry's face cleared. Pain transformed into something else: love, defiance, a fierce joy that had nothing to do with happiness and everything to do with connection. "You're the weak one," Harry gasped in his own voice. "And you'll never know love, or friendship. And I feel sorry for you." The possession shattered. Voldemort materialized 10 feet away, his red eyes wide with something Arthur had never expected to see. Fear. "Impossible," the Dark Lord whispered. "Love, Tom." Dumbledore's quiet words echoed in the devastated atrium. "The one power you never understood." Arthur applauded silently. The show was everything he'd hoped for and more. Suddenly, green flames erupted in fireplaces around the atrium. Ministry officials poured through, Aurors, department heads, and Minister Fudge himself, all staring in shock at the scene before them. Harry on the floor. Dumbledore standing protective. And in the center, like something from their worst nightmares, Lord Voldemort. Alive. Real. Undeniable. Arthur leaned back in his chair, grinning widely as Fudge stood frozen with his bowler hat askew, finally forced to confront the reality he'd spent a year denying. The Dark Lord's lipless mouth curved in what might have been amusement. His scarlet gaze swept the assembled crowd, drinking in their terror. "Remember this night," he said softly. Every word carried perfectly in the silence. "Remember how easily I entered your stronghold. Remember how your greatest protections meant nothing." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Until next time." He vanished in a swirl of black smoke, taking Bellatrix with him. The atrium erupted. Aurors shouted orders. Officials scrambled over each other. Someone was crying. Someone else had fainted. And in the center of it all, Cornelius Fudge stood frozen, his face the color of old parchment. "He's back," Fudge whispered. The words seemed torn from his throat. Voldemort, he's really back. Arthur leaned back in his conjured chair, grinning from ear to ear. The show had exceeded every expectation. Drama, action, emotional depth, and the Minister of Magic in striped pajamas. What more could anyone ask for? With the show concluded and canon events successfully preserved, Arthur decided it was time to make his exit. He had a stunned Sirius to deal with back in London, and questions to answer about what came next. Opening a portal to his manor, Arthur stepped through with deep satisfaction. The aftermath at the Ministry was not Arthur's problem. He had successfully saved Sirius Black without disrupting the larger timeline, witnessed the duel of the century, and now had time turners to experiment with under the Ancient One's guidance. All in all, a very productive evening. Now to figure out what to do with a supposedly dead godfather.
Thanks for listening.